Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today I'm bringing you the day 44 news of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. I once again would like to thank you all for coming. Of course, a lot of y'all come early, and I think it's just to watch that intro, and I can agree. I actually open up my own YouTube tab, although there's like a bit of a lag, so I can't watch the whole thing, but I always watch the intro. I think that's maybe the best intro that's ever been made to a video. To start off tonight, we have had a huge success with the merchandise store, and we're very pleased that everyone does enjoy the merchandise and is supporting the channel. We will be coming out with Leaf Spring merch soon, probably by Tuesday, so it's just a few days away. So if you're looking for that Leaf Spring merch, don't worry, it is on the way. Once again, I'd like everyone to know that for a short while, it'll probably be a few more weeks, all the purchases and profits of the merchandise channel, 10% of them will go towards a Ukrainian charity. We're trying to figure out which one it will be, and we're thinking that we're actually just going to donate it on stream with the $100 that I already put in every Sunday. So once again, if you would like to support the channel and Ukraine in a way, make sure to go get some channel merchandise and support us, and in return, we're going to try and support Ukraine. To go over the schedule, first off, we will be covering the location unknowns and the small amount of news that we've gotten in Kyiv today. It's only one bit of news, but it was an interesting piece nonetheless. We will then be answering 3 to 5 questions immediately afterwards. We will then move on past Kharkiv, because there's been no news there today, down into the Donbass, and we're actually going to have to divide the Donbass into 2 pieces. Everything north and east of Donetsk is going to be its own segment, and then everything inside of Mariupol and west of Donetsk will be another segment, including the international news as well, which there's only 2 bits of. So hope that lays out the schedule tonight. Once again, we're having to make a lot of changes to the schedule just due to how the war has developed. So hope y'all do enjoy the news tonight, and with that, let's get to the first bit of news. First off, we may remember the famous bridge in Irpin that was destroyed early on in the war by the Ukrainians, and we can see now that the Ukrainians have made a makeshift temporary bridge right beside the one that was there before. Of course, it's incredibly temporary. They use some concrete pipes as well as some gravel and I guess you could call them ballast stones. I know that's not the proper term, but they're just larger stones, and have made a kind of temporary bridge across the Irpin River for people to cross. Actually, honestly, I'm kind of impressed with the workmanship here. I mean, like, I know, of course, it's very simple, most likely, to just lay out the gravel and then the pipes and stuff, but it's really interesting to me that they've done it in such a short amount of time, because nothing has been heard about this until today, so I'm assuming that they probably did it over a very short amount of time, probably 24 hours or so, if I was to assume how quickly this was done, because they just liberated the area just recently. So anyways, with that, we're now going to move on from the Kyiv area, because we've gotten no news from there. Some of y'all may be wondering, well, what about Borodyanka? Because a little bit of news has been coming out of there today, and I didn't cover it because really we've actually covered everything there is there. I looked at the news today and the pictures they came out with, and it was just people kind of taking the same pictures of the same stuff we had seen before, so I decided not to show it again because I feel like it would be kind of redundant in a way. We're now going to move on past Chernihiv. Isn't it a blessing, y'all, that we can actually move past the entirety of the Northern Front and just say nothing happened? Like, that was not the case for the longest time. The Northern Front was where we spent the most time in stream covering the news, and now we can just pass through the entire area and go straight to the location unknowns. I think that's incredible that the war has changed that much in Ukraine's favor. So now we're going to move on to the location unknowns. The first bit of news we've gotten as a location unknown is that a TOS-1 was destroyed by a Stugna. Let me let y'all see this video. It's pretty good. Hang on just a second. Let me get that full screen. As you can see, they're using the... Hang on. What happened there? The tweet's been deleted. Okay, we'll go to Twitter. So as we can see right here, this is one of the Saudi Arabian export versions of the Stugna, because it has the Arabian text on page. Well, on the interface, not on page. Duh. But anyways, here's the video. As you can see, they're just watching it. You know what's so creepy to me is that this TOS crew, while the TOS is pretty much a war crime in its own, how it's being used, this TOS crew has no idea that a Stugna ATGM has been watching it for about 10 seconds at this point. No clue at all. you know, that's really creepy when you think about it, and it kind of makes you feel like soldiers should be paranoid a pretty good deal, that out of the blue there could be something watching them when they don't even expect it, because I'm sure that this TOS crew does not think that there's an ATGM just watching them in the tree line. Anyways, I'm gonna let the video continue.
Yes!
And they got the TOS.
Yes!
Now, isn't that nice?
Yes, блядь!
So anyways, that's the end of the video, then it just loops. But that was a nice video to see. The TOSs fire thermobaric weapons. As we know, they're not exactly a war crime to use on combatants, but we do know that they've been using them inside of cities, which is a war crime because they're killing civilians. So it's good to see another TOS get wiped out. That is less of a chance for the Russians to commit war crimes across the country. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see another Stugna destroy another tank. I can't get enough of the Stugnas. This one is also one of the Arabic interfaced Saudi Arabian export versions, but here's the video. As you can see, they fired. Also, I'd like to point out this is a T-72B3. While we're about to see the impending doom of it, let's talk about it. This is, of course, a T-72B3. You can tell by the kind of like ERA layout on the turret. T-72B3s are nothing more than a modification of kind of like the T-72A and B variants that they've trying to upgrade as much as possible to make them usable in a modern setting. They use a, let me make sure, 125mm smoothbore gun, T-72B3. I want to check this out real quick to make sure I'm saying this correctly. All the T-72s use the same caliber gun, but they're different variants. So the T-72A that we're looking at here on the specifications uses a 125mm gun. It is smoothbore, and I think that they've kept that. I think the British are the only ones that use rifled bored cannons on their tanks. But I do know, I think, that that gun has actually been upgraded. While it's still 125mm, it's not the same specification of gun. So it's an okay tank. I mean, like, it's not really that good. It's kind of dated, and the modifications to make it a T-72B3 is really just them trying to keep the tank relevant, so that way they don't have to spend a whole load of money developing a new tank. Kind of like they did with the Armada, and then that went nowhere. Anyways, now that I've talked a little bit about the tank, and it's just been sitting here waiting for me to unpause the video and let it go to its doom, let's now watch the video where the tank gets decimated. And there you go.
Yes.
They got it.
Или мы не попали опять в него? Опять взял... Да башня разворочена. Башня разворочена. Пацаны. Танк горит. Горит.
So the truth of the matter about this entire war and the AT weapons is that the Javelin was really hyped up at the beginning of this war, but honestly, I think the hero of this war, in terms of anti-tank weapons, has now become the Stugna. The Javelin, at least video evidence-wise, doesn't even compare to how many tanks the Stugna has destroyed. And I think, considering how well and effective this system is, at least in a defensive war that the Ukrainians are usually engaged in, I think a lot of foreign countries may start to look at buying the Stugna, since they're a Ukrainian-built anti-tank weapon, and maybe use them themselves, because it has a very good advantage in how it can be set up away from the crew, and the crew can be hidden in a safe location where the enemy can't see them, but the ATGM can still be fired at them. I think that's really, really a good advantage. I'm, of course, not a, I don't have any military experience. I just want to make that clear. I don't have any military experience, but you don't need to have military experience to know something such, that's so common sense, like being behind cover where they can't see you and having a weapon that can fire remotely is much better than having to stand out there in the open and shoot at it. You know, that's just kind of common sense to me. But now we're going to move on from that video to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian drone commit a night raid on Russian forces. Unfortunately, I have to mute the video because it does have copyrighted music in it, but nonetheless, here is the video. As you can see, the drone is flying over their positions, and it's looking at the vehicles. We can see here that looked like a, I want to say real quick, maybe a BMP-3. Kind of looks like a BMP-3 because it has that boxy front that doesn't really look as angled on the lower hole as a BMP-1 or 2. I can't really make out if there are any other vehicles. There may be something over here, but I really can't tell. Anyways, as the video goes on, we can see it's still getting a panning shot. It's now looking down amongst the trees. That looks like a tank. That also looks like another tank, and that's definitely a tank. So now we can see what appeared to have been a bomblet be dropped, and it explodes on or around the tank. I can't really tell because the graphics are so poor. Okay, now we see another bomb being dropped. The graphics are much clearer, and that one hit directly on the rear of the tank near the engine bay. So that was definitely a destroying hit. And so that's the end of the video, unfortunately, but you could tell that the drone, regardless of how much damage it did, knocked out at least one tank completely. That tank won't be going anywhere at all, and the Russians will probably end up abandoning it, or the Ukrainians will come through once the Russians fall back and destroy the tank. Oh, sorry about that, folks. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian tank get vaporized. This was a crazy video. I've never seen a tank go up like this on video in the war yet, but this one, this tank literally vaporized. Just check it out. It's insane. Oh my lord. That's nuts. I mean, I don't even know what kind of vehicle that was. I'm not even sure if that was like a T-72, a T-80 or something like that, because the way it exploded was like it had paper-thin armor like a Mista, and it just had large shells inside of it. It exploded and just tore the whole thing apart. Can't really tell you exactly what it is. That would be an assumption, because we don't really know. Let me go back and look again. We just can't tell. I can't tell from that footage what it is. But that thing blew up like a Roman candle. So that was very interesting. I wonder what hit it or what kind of tank it was, so that way we could get an idea, a little bit more of knowledge about what exactly was happening there. Anyways, we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see Ukrainian AT team fires at the Russians, and then they come under fire, and then it looks like they're getting evacuated. It also looks like they take a couple of wounded, but it's not too graphic, so I've decided that it was safe to show. And so here's the video. Oh, I just realized I was sitting here watching the video and I was like, wow, that's nice music, and then I was like, wait a minute, I can't play copyrighted music on stream, so unfortunately I have to mute it. I'm sorry, y'all. Anyways, we can see that the shot was fired. This guy has a great gun. Look at that thing. Wow, I don't know exactly what kind of gun it is, but it has a suppressor on it, or a silencer. I know a lot of people like get really like caught up in the terms, but it's something put on the end of the barrel that's threaded on, and it suppresses or silences the sound of the gunfire to a small degree. It depends, you know, there's a whole bunch of science behind it. You know, supersonic rounds aren't silenced as well as subsonic, and, you know, yada yada yada, and, you know, there's the whole 300 blackout gang. We're not going into that. That's a suppressor or a silencer on the end of what looks like maybe an AR platform, but I'm not exactly sure. It also has a really nice scope on it. So now we can see him picking up the gun. Man, we could get a really good look at it there. Let me take a look at that again. I mean, maybe, yeah, it looks a lot like an M4. Let me know in the comments what y'all think. If it's an M4 or maybe some kind of variant of it. But nonetheless, it looks a lot like one. It may just be actually an AR-15 that's been heavily rigged, but I don't really think that. It's probably just an M4. He smacked it on the car door, which, you know, it doesn't really matter. Some people are wounded, of course. There's a few. He tourniquets one of their legs. Oh, man. I hate to see that. I really do, because usually when someone gets their leg, well, usually when someone has a tourniquet put on a limb, it means they'll lose that limb regardless, because at that point you've cut off the blood flow to it. And so that you're going to have that amputated most times, unless if you're really lucky and somehow you get that taken care of incredibly quickly. So I always hate seeing tourniquets used. And another thing I hate, getting a little bit off base of Ukraine, I hate when you watch riot footage or something like that here in America or anywhere, and someone suffers a minor injury, and a bystander's first instinct is, oh, let me whip a tourniquet on that leg. You know, he's like got a small cut, it's about 2 inches long, it's oozing a little bit of blood. You could put pressure on it, fine, but I'm going to get a tourniquet and just cut it off like at the upper thigh. Like, I hate that, because it's like you're going to make that guy lose his leg for nothing if no one takes care of that quickly. But anyways, as you can see, they're loading up the soldiers into this BTR, it seems, and now they're riding off on a T-64 here. I believe that may be a wounded man somewhere on the front of this thing. But you gotta say, the professionalism of the man who had the GoPro on him in the video was incredible. Considering that they were taking fire from the direction that he set off on this road here in the video when he runs around the car, he actually runs into the fire past some of the wounded to go try and help out the others. And you've got to say, that's a level of professionalism and bravery that should be heavily praised and awarded, especially in a war, because it takes a lot of courage to get up and run from where enemy fire is coming from. Of course, you know, that's common sense. And so I gotta say, the guy who's taking this GoPro footage, I hope he gets awarded for that kind of bravery, at least some kind of minor award, if not a very major award, for taking the initiative and helping out his partners in arms. So anyways, that's the end of that video. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians conduct an artillery strike on Russian troops. Surprisingly and interestingly enough, it actually looks like a very similar location to where we saw the 5-minute video of the Ukrainian troops getting shelled the other day. It looks like it may be in a similar location. But what's interesting to me is that while the Russians never really adjusted their fire where it was hitting the Ukrainian groups of soldiers dead on, the Ukrainian artillery is literally hitting within feet of this Russian group. So unfortunately, I have to keep this one muted as well because it has copyrighted music in it. But you can see them highlight the actual soldiers that are hiding there. And it also looks like their faces as well, which I don't know how they got the info. Maybe they surrendered after this barrage. But anyways, as you can see, the fire starts raining in all around them, just feet away. So you can say that the Ukrainian artillery crews apparently can reap a lot more information from their drones and their forward observations and spotters than the Russians are, because their fire, like right there, is dead on, which is something interesting to note. And so that's the end of the video. I was just wanting to show, like, yesterday, if y'all were here yesterday, and go check out yesterday's stream. It's near the end. But we actually watched a 5-minute video, once again to recap for for some people who may not have been here yesterday, of Russian artillery landing on a Ukrainian trench, and it never hit just right. It was always about 30 feet, 40 feet off. It was always too far from the trench, and so it never really hit them. Today, though, we can see the exact same thing happening in reverse, where the Ukrainians are firing their artillery at the Russians, and we can see that their artillery is much more accurate, which is very interesting to me and may suggest that may be an advantage that the Ukrainians have, is that they may have GPS technology integrated into their artillery units, along with the drone spotters, which makes their artillery fire that much more accurate and that much more deadly. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a VSU evacuation. If someone could give me an answer to what a VSU is, because I actually did a decent amount of Google searching for this earlier today, and it seemed like the answer was that it was some kind of militia group that was formed in 2014, but I could never get an exact answer as to what side this unit popped up on. So if someone could give me an answer in the comments to what that is, I would love to know. But anyways, I'm going to show y'all a bit of this lengthy video. As you can hear, the fire is coming in and almost whizzing right over their heads. The person filming tries to hide in a bush on the side of the road. We don't really know about the group in front of them. Okay, yeah, they're blue. I watched the first 30 seconds of this, but nonetheless, now we know they're Ukrainian, so we know that going forward. So, also, I saw in the comments, because I turned it on real quick, that a lot of people are saying VSU stands for Ukrainian Armed Forces, so thank you very much for mentioning that. But anyways, here's the rest of the video.
Ще є хтось? 300 ще є?
Нема.
We can hear someone yelling further up the road. That may suggest that someone may be wounded. Maybe a bad situation happening up there. Oh, yeah. Yikes. That's not good. You can see they're still taking fire from somewhere in the distance. This man also appears to be carrying an RPG-7. As we can see, he's holding one of the rounds there, along with an AK. I'm not exactly sure which kind, though.
Відходь, відходь.
And so that's the end of the video. We saw a wounded man. It appeared that he was loaded inside the truck and then carried away. We're not exactly sure if he did make it in the truck. We didn't see it on video, but I'm assuming, obviously, that's what the truck came for. It didn't just drive up there to take a look around or anything. So hopefully that man survived. And it is interesting to see how the Ukrainians reacted to a combat injury among their ranks, because we haven't been seeing a lot of footage of the Ukrainians taking any kind of casualties, whether they be killed or wounded. But it is good to know that there is a decent amount of professionalism and they are able to keep cohesion and composure in the face of enemy fire. That's something good to know. We're now going to move on to the next video, where we can see this German Shepherd called Zeus, and it's a sweet dog, and I just thought it was a very nice little video, and so I'm going to let y'all watch it.
What's your dog's name?
Zeus.
Zeus.
Yes, he's very brave. We're together from the first day of the war.
Zeus.
Zeus.
Is he eating well? Does he get good food?
Unfortunately, no. He need veterinary all of the time, but here we have no possibility. But all of the guys here around know him well, and everybody trying to bring some food for him. So he now eats different food from different brands, but there is a war. What can we do? After we will win, I will take him to the doctor.
That's a cute dog. He's getting gray at the snout, so you know that's an old German Shepherd. But I've actually grown up around German Shepherds, and I can tell you they're very sweet dogs. And I hate that it can't get the veterinarian attention it needs, because as the guy was saying, it needs veterinarian attention, but they can't get any due to the war. I'm assuming maybe all the vets have closed down, or they just don't have the supplies of medicine that this dog may need, which is unfortunate. But I hope that that dog does make it through the war, helps out his bud, and at the end it gets a little bit of medical help as a treat, I guess. But nonetheless, it's neat to see the dogs are being used on the front line by the Ukrainians, and it does appear that they're being used pretty well, because in the next bit of news, we can see that there has been a bomb-defusing dog. Once again, it looks like the Ukrainians use a lot of the smaller breeds of dog for bomb defusing, but nonetheless, we can see here, if all of these are the bombs this dog has defused, it's done a pretty good job. So with that, that's really all we got to say about that. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, and here we can see a destroyed Panzer, and this thing has been destroyed entirely. Like, you can hardly even recognize it as a Panzer. As you can see, the guys walking around and observing some of the wreckage. We can see a wrench there. I think a Russian may have been trying to hastily repair that truck, the Panzer, but sadly, I don't think that one's going to be repairable. I think the insurance will have to write that one off. We can also see some kind of Ural 4320, and another one. We can actually see Kamaz over there. So it looks like this wasn't just a single one-off Panzer. It was actually multiple vehicles, but the Panzer, of course, is the most expensive of all of them, and so it gets the most attention. Because once again, the Ukrainians are inflicting monetary damage on the Russian military that is nearly immeasurable at this point. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we've seen something sick. Something that you would expect guerrillas to do in some kind of war of insurgency, and that's that the Russians placed a mine under a chair. So here's the video of that. As you can see right there, it's a small mine, and it looks like they put it directly under the rail on this chair, so that way if someone sat down on it, it would hopefully press down on the mine and explode under the chair, I'm guessing. Nonetheless, that is... Maybe, actually, hang on. Maybe I'm overlooking something. Maybe that mine was put there on the side of the sidewalk hoping someone would step over it, but then they went and put a chair on it because it looks like they have some kind of writing and it says Granata on it, which means grenade. I don't know what the rest of the words mean, but obviously that means grenade. So maybe the Ukrainians put a chair on top of that so no one would walk on it. So That's still pretty messed up that it looks like they put a small grenade in a residential area. Like, what if that mine was never found and the family who lived at that house returned home to it, and then one of their kids stepped on that mine and got killed? That's pretty messed up in a way. So we're actually going, well, not in just a way, that's pretty messed up altogether, really, when you think about it. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see a Ukrainian military band play some funky tunes for some people who are lined up at a grocery store waiting to get some food. Check this out. That's pretty cool, honestly. Like, if you were in the middle of a war and you were lined up to go into a grocery store, and you weren't fighting, and you knew that there were soldiers out there on the front lines fighting to defend the country, and then you saw a group of them playing like these sick tunes in front of the grocery store that you're in front of to go get food at, that would be pretty cool, honestly. So I have to say, also their band was really good at playing that song. I don't know what song that was specifically, but incredibly well played. We're now going to move on to the last bit of location unknown news, where we've seen a modern Russian drone get shot down. And as the title on this post says, the CIA is probably frothing to see what the Russian drones are capable of technologically. So here's the pictures. It's just a series of pictures, actually all in one. You can see the destroyed wing of the drone. You can actually see the destroyed pieces of it here. Another set of destroyed pieces. And then what appears to be the optical sensors of the drone in a way. Because that looks like the little... let me think of what it's called. The ball, the basket, I guess you could say. I know that's not really a good term for it, but the basket's held in probably under the drone. Of course, this thing was shattered to pieces, so I have no clue what it would even be called, what the designation of this drone is. But it does appear to be a much more modern drone, and a much larger one at that, and so hopefully this all this stuff, all these parts can be analyzed by the Ukrainians, or maybe sent over to the United States for the US to take a good look at what at this drone and what it may be capable of. So with that, we've actually covered all of the location unknown news tonight, and we're now going to start moving on down towards the southern front. But before we do, we're actually going to take 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So, good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you once again for another night of news. First up tonight, we have a $20 donation from Praise Adonai. We appreciate your donation, good sir. Next up, we have a comment from longtime channel supporter Zeta Lane, who puts in a donation of $20 and says, if the Stugna is a homegrown Ukrainian weapon system, but the one you showed was from Saudi Arabia, how does that happen? And thanks a lot for the detail you go into on the tanks and weapons. Great job.
Thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, it is Ukrainian made. Stugnas are a Ukrainian designed and produced weapon, but those specific Stugnas right there that you're seeing with the Arabic stuff on their interface were actually made to be exported to Saudi Arabia. But due to the onset of this war, that deal was canceled, and then those were pushed into Ukrainian service with Ukrainian units. So they still have the Arabian interfaces on them, and so that explains where, of course, like the Ukrainian wordage on the screens come from. So it's kind of like a bit of like a, oh crap, things are going really bad. These were supposed to go to America, so they're in English. It's like a bit of an analogy, but we're going to have to keep them, although we speak Chinese, and so they're going to have American wordage on them, but they're Chinese produced and Chinese designed, if you see what I'm saying. So I hope that does answer your question, and thank you so much once again for the support. It does help out our channel a lot, and of course I don't want to do this too much, but we do have a merch shop, and so if you would like to actually get something out of supporting the channel instead of just my thanks in an answer to a question, make sure to go get a t-shirt or a mug. We've got a bunch of neat products, and we're still looking at getting Leaf Spring merch, which will be out soon. So I hope y'all are all looking forward to that, and I hope I answered that question, and thank you very much once again for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And we do have quite a few good questions coming in tonight. And as always, if you have a question for the Enforcer, please tag him using @the_enforcer in your chat message, and we'll be sure to try to read it before the before the stream ends tonight. So next up, we have a comment from Jabari Killians, who puts in a donation of $20 and says, "So I don't know if you've noticed, but I've seen the same blonde female Ukrainian soldier in about 6 videos now. Last was pushing northeast from Kiev. Then just now in the VSU video, she's the Valkyrie of Ukraine, some say."
Very interesting. I thank you very much for the info. And I haven't really been following the stories of like independent Ukrainians that are kind of being like labeled as heroes and stuff, because the Ghost of Kyiv story popped up and everyone was really into it for a bit, and then the questionability of who this person was started to come into question. So after that I was like, I'm not really going to talk about the stories of specific people who are getting like promoted a lot, just in case if it turns out that maybe they don't exist. But with that, obviously since she's on video, she does exist. So I thank you very much for sharing that info with us. And I actually didn't know about that specific story of the Valkyrie of Kyiv. So thank you very much for the info, and thank you very much for the support once again. And so with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the news in the Donbass.
And the last question of the segment goes to TJ Johnson, who puts in a donation of $11. He says, "I admit that I'm disappointed that you're having trouble with the map. I'd like to go back and view and pause and form my own opinions after watching your channel. Still going to donate for your coffee."
Well, thank you very much for the support. And sadly, as you can see up here on the stream, this little button here has been circling for about 2 days now. I don't know why, but it's not able to upload anymore to my Google My Maps account. So sadly, I can't share this one without losing all the information that's on it at the moment, as far as I know. Because when I click refresh, it says, do you want to lose all the stuff you've added and edited to this map? And of course, I always put no, because then, I'd be in a very bad bind. I have to find all the stuff again. So I'm going to try and work on that tomorrow and see if I can maybe get a fix to it. But right now, it looks like that's the way it's going to be for the moment. So I'm glad you read the description and saw that there was no map. I'm sorry about that, everyone, but we are working on that as much as we can and trying to figure out what's happening and the reason why we can't really share any of them anymore without losing the map altogether. So please, everyone, bear with me while we try and figure that out. And I thank you very much once again for the support, and hope that does answer the question as to why that is currently a problem. So with that, we're now going to wrap up that question segment, and we're now going to move on to the Donbass area, specifically the areas that are north and west of Donetsk, and then we'll cover Mariupol and this one bit of news from the small village on its own, along with the international news, so that way we can still try and have like our 3 segments in the stream. First off, we've seen today that the Ukrainians attacked the Russian-held town of Kramatorsk, which right here is very interesting, and also it led me to change the front line a little bit, because beforehand, this front line was actually a straight shot from here to this little break near the town of Marne. So I've actually adjusted it because the Ukrainians are counterattacking Russian forces in this village. It suggests that they actually hold this town. So the front line has been changed to reflect that. And so hopefully this video has loaded by now, and now we will go into the video. So you can see a decent amount of firefighting. You can actually... Okay, so here's something that I find incredible about the Ukrainian videos. They're never lying about what's going on, like as far as the fighting and stuff goes, because in Russian combat videos, it's always silent. But in these videos, you can hear the distinct little snap of the bullets as they pop off the ground that are being shot at them, while you can also hear them firing back. So you know that this video is actually being taken in an active combat zone, instead of what the Russians appear to be doing, which is going to abandon areas and then like staging this whole entire like little mini movie production in a way. So I'm going to let the video continue. see it now appears that they're advancing. Still firing into the tree line. I have a feeling that the Russians are now a good distance away, or otherwise they wouldn't be standing up in an open field. Hopefully that's the case, so that way they're not putting themselves in any unnecessary danger.
Вперед, вперед! Осторожно! РПГ-7Б спереді, там...
Okay, so when you watch combat footage, because I always have this, I had this conception before I really started getting into combat footage in this war, because I watched it on occasion here and there, but not as much as I do now, because it's practically a job for me. One thing you always think, and I bet a lot of y'all will agree with me, is that whenever you hear about wars and soldiers fighting, you always think there's going to be something really well put together. There's always going to be a spot for them to hide. And that everything just looks, you know, even though obviously movies don't reflect what a war looks like, they're going to move around like they do on the movies, in a way at least as far as getting to cover and such things like that. But when you actually watch fights go on in real life, firefights and such things like that, it's really weird because honestly, considering I'm a reenactor, maybe some of you all don't know that, but I am. Real firefights look a lot like reenacting firefights, which is weird to me with how people actually just walk in the open and stand up and just fire the guns sometimes. They may crouch, and sometimes they'll be in groups, and it's really interesting to me because I always have this idea, and I'm sure it's like this for every military in the world, because we've seen a lot of footage come through, and even the most trained units all fight in this way. And a lot of people probably have the idea that to be in the military, there's like this huge level of training involved. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't, but that the result out of it is this cohesive fighting force is always in a perfect little formation, always, you know, doing the perfectly right textbook thing. But you can see in a real war, it doesn't really look like that, even when they're actually doing incredibly well, which is interesting to me, and I'm wondering if y'all have observed that as well. So let me know in the comments what y'all are thinking about that, because it's just so interesting to me to see that firefights in real life on film actually just look a lot like a bunch of dudes just fighting a war. I mean, like, you know, I don't really know how to explain it, but I hope y'all understand what I'm trying to get at here. So anyways, we're gonna let the video continue. As we see the firefighting continues, it looks like there's some kind of rags on the side of a tree. Now it appears that they're taking a large amount of loot. Looks like there's, of course, armbands on a uniform. As we can see, it appears that they're now moving on, and there's also a destroyed BMP-2 here, which is very nice. And so that's the end of that video. Once again, incredibly interesting to actually watch a Ukrainian unit in a firefight. And we know that they were, because you could hear the bullets cracking around them near the beginning of the video. So we know that they were fighting the Russian units for sure. And once again, it's really interesting to me to see how firefights are actually fought in real life. And it also explains to me, because a lot of veterans actually get involved in the reenacting field, and then they tell you, oh, wow, you know, like reenacting, you wouldn't believe it, but it's very similar, rather than actually being shot at, to how people fight in a real war. And I've always heard that, and I'm like, I think you're just trying to, like, make this seem a little bit more than what it is. But now that we actually have videos of seeing how firefights are conducted in real life, you're like, wow. Like, yeah, that's actually pretty similar in a way. Because if you ever go to a reenacting event, it looks kind of like what they were doing. Let me rewind right about here. Wait a minute, let me skip forward a little bit. Right here, where they just kind of get out and walk and shoot. It kind of looks like that, and it kind of feels like that, which is just interesting. But anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, and we're going to check out the. Let me make sure I've got this correct. The Ukrainians having a 50 cal. This was somewhere in the Luhansk area, so the mark isn't exactly accurate. It's somewhere around here, but we don't know exactly where. But we can see that the Ukrainian forces, whether it be a TDF or the regular army, has a Barrett 50 caliber gun. It looks like it also has some kind of suppressor / silencer on it, which is very interesting. A Barrett 50 cal can punch through a BMP-2 or a BMD-4. So most Russian light armored vehicles that are kind of like in the APC infantry fighting vehicle arena will be punched through with this gun alone. So it's kind of an AT gun in a way. I don't know if they're using this against personnel. I don't think that that's allowed. I'm not exactly sure, but if it is, they're probably being vaporized into a mist because this thing is a beast of a gun. So anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we're going to go to the village of Kramatorsk, well, the city of Kramatorsk, where we've heard the news that a lot of people are probably waiting for today, that they've heard from major news outlets, and I can confirm the news. We'll actually have to go down towards the area of Amroiska, actually kind of near the area of Shatarsk, where we've seen Tochka missiles being fired early on in the day. So here's the video. As you can see, there's the Tochkas being fired and traveling through the sky. Of course, it looks like this tweet was deleted. But it looks like it's still going on, actually. Let's see if we can just continue to watch it. Apparently not. So anyways, the Tochkas were fired, and they started to travel towards an unknown location. We're not exactly sure if these are the exact same ones that caused the damage in Kramatorsk, but nonetheless, they were Tochkas much like these that were being launched around Shakarsk. And so they traveled a decent ways towards the city of Kramatorsk, and then in the middle of the day, hundreds of women and children were at this train station trying to board a train on the way out of the area, considering that the fighting is now coming to them in a way. The missiles landed around the train station and killed 50 civilians, mostly women and children, and wounded more than 100. We're not really sure if that number has climbed at the moment, but the last we checked, it was around 126 wounded and 50 killed. We do have pictures, of course, of the attack. This is nothing more than a summary of what I just said. And here is a picture of the platform after the bodies have been cleared, showing the absolute carnage that had been caused by this attack that is completely unsolicited and unwarranted. It was not attacking any military targets whatsoever. It directly attacked civilians and killed 50 of them. This is actually one of the largest massacres of civilians that has occurred in this war, and the Russians who conducted this attack should be held accountable, and the world should make sure that those soldiers in particular are able to even be pulled out of Russia to be held accountable for what they've done here. It's purely criminal, and it has no place in a modern war. Considering that it is a guided ballistic missile, you would think that this is deliberate, and it probably is, really, when you think about it. And so that's all the news there is there. It said 30 civilians died in that one snippet right there, that post, but actually later on that number was confirmed to have gotten up to 50. So it's really aggravating to know that that stuff is still happening, but hopefully the Ukrainians can push them out and make them pay for what they've done. We're now going to move on back down towards the Luhansk area, as we're going to cover the news of course, more S-21s, two S-1s, operating in the Donbass area. It appears to be actual Russian artillery instead of DPR, LPR artillery, because they're flying the Russian flag. But anyways, here's the video.
Залп из 4 орудий в поле под Мариуполем. Артиллерийская батарея работает в 8 километрах по прямой от промзоны. Цель — выбегающие из укрытий в сторону города украинские нацгвардейцы.
As you can see, they continue to fire, and of course we've got the reporter who's going to hype it up like that he's wearing blue jeans. I'm sure that that's something really Russian, you know. But anyways, this guy is probably going to sit here and hype up and talk about how the Russians are winning, or, you know, how the Ukrainians are so scared and they pee their pants when the artillery is fired at them. But the honest truth is that they're firing this artillery because the Ukrainians aren't giving up as easily as they thought they would. And 44 days into a war that looked like they were only expecting to go on for 2 or 3 days, they are still trying to push the Ukrainians out of just the border areas of their country nearly. And why does he have to squat and kind of like shift around in a weird way, you know? It's like, I know you're near artillery, but you don't have to act like that.
122-миллиметровые осколочные мины отправляют из саушек с интервалом в 15 секунд. За 10 минут до огневого налета из самоходок выкинули 100 гильз. Внутри гвоздики это еще одно название арт-установки «Дым от пороха». Под башней тесно. В бронежилете
And we
и
can see
каске я с
inside the
большим
tanks.
трудом уместился
Tanks,
среди
of
трех
course, aren't in good condition. This looks like something you'd buy as a used tank that's been sitting in a lot for quite a while. And I'm being serious. You can actually pull up used tanks for sale. A lot of them are Russian, and a lot of them are in this condition. And in that condition, usually it says requires engine rebuild or something like that. And you can see that most of the vehicles in the Russian army, well, at least from this one example, look to be in similar condition, even the running ones.
военнослужащих. Заряжающий подает снаряды в ствол, механик жмет на тормоз, чтобы машина не отпрыгнула назад во время выстрела. Командир орудия с позывным «Мельник» проверяет введенные координаты. Он в ополчении с 2014 года.
Команда, ну, смерть фашистам, что ли. Доделаем работу дедов, как говорится. Наши деды чуть-чуть не доделали, а мы их доделаем.
So we now see an interview from a guy who looks like he drinks from sun up to sundown, and he doesn't like his wife. He looks like he's having an absolutely fun time with this thing. And also, look at his tanker helmet. This thing looks worn out. Goodness.
Так обидно.
По 2 снаряда белым огонь.
Этот артиллерийский взвод в основном состоит из бывших шахтеров. Самоходные артиллерийские установки они получили 7 лет назад, обучались стрельбе на практике. Саушки стоят с интервалом 40 метров и ведут параллельный огонь. Значит, и цели этих мин сконцентрированы на таком же небольшом участке. Ополченцы разгромили большую часть
So we can
техники
see that they're
противника,
still firing.
укрывающегося на
And of course, the
Азовстале
guy's still
и
trying to hype up the
комбинате
artillery,
Ильича.
probably.
Но кое-что могло уцелеть. За сегодняшний день ствольная артиллерия на этой позиции отправила почти 300 мин на захваченную боевиками территорию. Промзона дымилась около часа.
Neat stuff. Really cool. Honestly, probably all going to be blown up within 2 days. Totally fine with that, honestly, and I look forward to seeing the footage of it. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from the area, where we can see an ATGM strike. There wasn't a lot of information when I looked at this video. I looked at the first few seconds of it, and I was like, okay, this is legit. It happened today. But I couldn't really tell whose side was firing the ATGM and at what. So anyways, I'm going to let y'all see the video. Hang on. So it looks like that's a truck, but I can't see any Z on the front. So I don't know if this is the DPR, LPR, or Russian troops that are firing at a Ukrainian vehicle. I can't really tell still. So the ATGM is on the way. Squiggling around as normal. And then it hits the vehicle dead on. But I can't tell whose vehicle that was and who was firing the ATGM, sadly. So just going to have to take that video for what it is. And we're now going to move on from that video onto the videos that are around the Donetsk area. And once we cover these, I'm going to kind of talk about the situation here in this kind of bulge that the Ukrainians have found themselves in. And then we're going to answer 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, we can now see a Ka-52 once again operating in the Donbass. This one appears to be flying dangerously, though, because the nose is tilted downwards and it is firing at a target in the distance, which makes me assume that the target is actually close. And so that may mean that it's under the direct threat of being hit by a manpad or some kind of Starstreak, because we do know that those have made it over there now, and they are actually being used pretty well. So anyways, here's the video. As you can hear, the missile was fired, and the helicopter kept on flying. So with that, we're now going to move on to the last bit of video that we've gotten from the area near Amrusivka, I believe is the name, where we can see a Russian Su-25 flying low over the city, probably towards the front lines or back from it. So anyways, here's the video. Pretty low to the ground. And actually, pretty quiet, actually, at least as far as the video went, but it's much louder than real life. I've been close to A-10s in real life, you know, of course, at an air show, the only one I ever went to. And surprisingly, they're not too loud, but they are loud enough that, you know, it's not, like, quiet or anything, kind of like it is in this video. So we're now going to move on from that to the situation in this pocket again. And I want to cover it again because I was thinking, this was an interesting observation that the M03 ran from the northwestern side of the pocket to the southeastern side. But what about the rest of the pocket? What if they started to try and divide this up even further? And so I started to look at this, and I was thinking, well, considering that they're going for Rubizhny, I'm going to start drawing on this map. I might get rid of it in the end. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to keep it around. But we do know that the Russians are currently inside of Rubizhny, and they're fighting for it. So what I'm thinking is, what if they're trying to encircle Severodonetsk from directly behind it? Instead of making this larger pocket that they have to deal with, they could kind of divide it up into smaller ones and then deal with the remnants in each pocket one at a time. So, with that in mind, I think the first thing they're going to do is try and push off of the T-1302 and also the P-66, since we know they control that as well, at the same time, and take Rubizhny and then travel down this ring road, the T-1302, around Severodonetsk, and probably try and capture most of the major roadways. Now, this part right here I'm kind of questionable about, because there's not any major roadways here beyond this point that I've made on the map. So I'm not really sure if it would be possible to supply the units that went that far. And also, Lysychansk is right here, which is kind of like a metropolitan area with these two towns. So it's like, how close could you really get with a front line towards these two cities without really getting inside of Lysychansk and then kind of defeating the point of the encirclement, because you'll be right in the middle of one of the cities. So this is going to be a gray area that I draw up here. But I'm going to draw it up anyways, just so that way we can discuss it. And we're going to cut that really down far, so that way it's not, like, right in Lysychansk. So, I think that the Russians might try and encircle Severodonetsk in this fashion right here, Russian front. Let me make sure to color this up in yellow, so that way we can see it very well. Thicken the line a little. There we go. So, before they go and take this massive area, and they may even try and divide this up a little bit more to make it a more manageable piece, I think they may be trying to encircle Severodonetsk, because this little counterattack that we saw here in Crimea, and also knowing that they're in Rubizhny, tells us that they are trying to push behind the city, where they may be able to create a pocket. Also, what makes sense about this is that in modern wars, and in most major wars, and of course by Russian strategy, they focus on operating through main roads. So anything on this map that's a road in yellow, they're going to be going for. They're going to be vying for it. So with this in mind, all this area that's kind of made up this pocket is on a major roadway of some sort. And so, at least in theory, if their logistics were well put together, they'd be able to well supply these forces that would be creating this encirclement. Then that would put the defenders of Severodonetsk in a pretty tight situation, because as far as I know, and let me see if I can actually pull this up, Severodonetsk. We may actually go down the rabbit hole here on Severodonetsk, because I feel like this is about to become a major part of this war. So we're going to go to Google Maps so we can get some satellite footage, satellite imagery of the town. So this is what it looks like. And here's Lysychansk. So we can see it's a generally like straight run city from the northwest to the southeast. So you can actually get fairly close to that. Let me see if we can adjust anything here. You can really get right here near this little creek. So we're actually going to adjust that front a little bit, because that would make more sense encirclement-wise. And we're going to move this down a little bit. There we go. And so, I think an encirclement will more take the style of this. We're not going to adjust the red line here, because that would logically move forward to around the city perimeter, probably on the T-1306. And then they would surround the city entirely. We need to take a good look at Severodonetsk, though, and see what we've gotten here. So it appears down here, we have a large amount of commie blocks. So we have this like little subdivision thing that looks like Khrushchevkas. We also have some small suburbs out here, which I believe the Russians are already in, because from what we've been able to see over the past few days, it does look like fighting is happening in this little rural suburb kind of thing on the outskirts of the city. So they may already be in there, but I'm not exactly sure, so take that with a grain of salt. So the little Khrushchevkas, we know that those will be fairly easy to defend in a way, because we've seen in Mariupol that the areas of the town with the Khrushchevka blocks are kind of a lot easier to defend in a way than the normal little houses, at least as far as we've seen. Because if we go back to this map, because I've actually updated the Mariupol map today and we're going to use it as a reference, we can see that all the little houses that make up the outskirt of Mariupol, and we'll also go to Mariupol on here, although it's laggy. I don't know why. Sorry about that, everyone. We're going to go down to Mariupol. I'm going to see if that does remain the case. Yes, you can see that the Russians have actually taken most of the little kind of like blocks that have detached houses on them, and they were facing a large amount of problems in kind of like the commie block areas. And it seems like they had a much harder time pushing through those, because as far as I can tell, the Ukrainians hold on to this large swath of the blocks, and they also hold on to this swath here in the downtown area. They also hold on to the metallurgical plant, which would suggest to me that they would have some very great defensive positions in Severodonetsk, because it is a similar looking town. So as far as the defenders' position, it looks like they'll be in a pretty good advantage here. Once again, large factory over here. In a way, it looks like. Let me make sure that's true. Yeah, nothing but a bunch of large factories. I'm not really sure if it's still active, but I will assume it is. And so that will be a decent defensible position if they lose Lysychansk. And also the commie blocks that kind of make up this area of the city look to be advantageous spots for them. I think, though, they will lose this suburb here, and they could probably lose a decent amount of this northern chunk, but they will hold this L-shaped area for a very long time. And there's really nothing that the Russians can do with that information, because, you know, look at what they're able to do with that information in Mariupol. They got drone footage all over the place down there showing exactly where they're holding, and yet nothing has really changed from that regard. So I think Severodonetsk would be able to hold for quite a long while as well. Probably a month or a month and several weeks, or however long Mariupol has been able to hold out, they may be able to hold out as well. So I think that would be a pretty decent spot defensively. So even if they do get encircled, it's going to be buying up the time and resources that they put into encircling the city in the first place. So it won't really give the Russians too much of an advantage to encircle it. Also, as far as the larger pocket area, I'm not really sure if that would be a thing. Once again, they know their offensive capabilities are incredibly poor, so I'm sure they're going to try and cut up this pocket into much more smaller, well, not pocket, this bulge into smaller, manageable pieces, and try and take care of it in a piecemeal way, because they have to do something that resource-wise makes sense. So with that, we're now going to start moving on down towards the southern area of the Donbass, towards Mariupol. But before we do, we're going to take some questions from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so first up, we have a $100 donation from Panama. Thank you very much, Panama, for that very generous donation. Their comment is, with the retreat of the Russians in the north, is retaking the Donbass a possibility for the Ukrainians, in your opinion? Thank you for all of your hard work, and Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraina, Slava Ukraini, I mean, sorry, I say Ukraina for some reason. I heard it said one time like that, and somehow I keep on repeating it. But I do believe it is the case. Although I'm kind of saying that the Russians may be able to produce some kind of meaningful counterattacks, which they may be able to. I think the Ukrainians are still in the great position right now, as of this week, to be able to produce a large amount of successful counterattacks of their own. Although it looks like the one near Kherson has kind of fizzled in a way, because we haven't seen any developments in the Kherson area for quite a while. I do think that they may be able to have some progress around here, as in pushing the Russians away from the Izium area, and also trying to reconnect the entirety of the M03 from one end to the other. So I hope that does answer your question, and thank you so much, Panama, for the huge donation. It does help out this channel a lot, and it helps us to keep running. And so I thank you so much. It means a lot to me, and I hope I did answer that question in a meaningful way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And everybody wouldn't even believe who is next. Up next is a question from Knuckles. He puts in a donation of $20 and says, do you think it could be conscripts that are killing civilians, not knowing how to use their own weapons properly? Also, Boris and Olaf said it wouldn't be appropriate for the West to meet all of Ukraine's needs. What are your thoughts?
First off, I think that conscripts probably aren't killing civilians, because although they're poorly trained, it takes a decent amount of knowledge to aim a gun at someone and then pull the trigger. First off, you have to load the gun, then chamber around, then turn the safety off, then aim the gun at someone with your finger on the trigger, and then pull it and shoot them. Most of the conscripts in the Ukrainian military actually have prior military experience, so that question is kind of moot in a way, because you know, they do have prior military experience, most of them do. To answer the second part of the question, I do think it is appropriate for the West to meet all of Ukraine's needs, because we are right now pretty much using Ukraine to settle our problems with Russia. And so if we want to make sure that this war doesn't extend into areas outside of Ukraine, we'll have to make sure to provide them with almost all the material needs they ask for, because they are, of course, the ones fighting the war. They're kind of sacrificing their people, and in return, we're sacrificing our material equipment. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Level 70, who puts in a donation of $11. They say, is there any technology today that can block communications to military drones over several square miles?
I think there may be. Let's pull that up. Drone jamming technology. Let's see if there's anything like that out there. What is a drone jammer? Jammers work by blasting electromagnetic noise at the radio frequencies that drones use to operate and emit information. I think there is, without going too far into this, because I know that the Iranians apparently did manage to hack an American drone that was flying somewhere in the Persian Gulf and then fly it into Iran and land it and pretty much steal the thing, as far as they say. I don't know if there was a lot of confirmation to that story because the U.S. denied it, but then again, something like that would be something a country would deny because that would look terrible. But nonetheless, I do think there is that kind of jamming technology. Because it seems like it will only make sense, considering that they are connected through a radio frequency, and considering we already have like radio jammers and such things like that. I don't really feel like it'd be too much of a stretch to produce technology that could jam drone connections to their operators. So once again, that's kind of working off of assumptions based off of what I think is reasonable, but I hope that does answer the question in a way. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and so we're going to go to one more question from this section, and then we're going to move into the southern Donbass area and the international news. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And the last one of the segment goes to M. Adams, who puts in a donation of $10. He says, can you reflect on the status of Moldova, and if their nation comes under attack from Russia, have they allies?
To answer that question, the situation in Moldova looks to be steady right now. Transnistria isn't really a threat due to supplies being transported into Transnistria having to travel through an air corridor, which the Ukrainians could easily interdict incredibly quickly and efficiently, considering that their air defense forces haven't really been destroyed, and IL-76s would have to fly through Ukrainian territory or NATO territory in any respect to reach Moldova and in the end Transnistria. I think that they'll be okay for now because it looks like the Ukrainians are holding the Russians incredibly well, so the Russians will never be able to directly supply any offensives that will be on their doorstep. And on top of that, Moldova, I think, would have the time to request emergency membership to NATO or maybe the European Union to try and further bolster their position and ensure that the Russians won't try anything. Although I'm not really sure what the political situation is in Moldova, considering that Transnistria does exist. So I don't, honestly, in my opinion, in my assessment of the situation, which is, once again, take it with a grain of salt, I think that Moldova is in a pretty secure position right now, and that their sovereignty won't be threatened anytime soon by Russia. So I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And once again, want to let everyone know that all the support y'all give through the Super Chats helps us to support the channel and think big in the future as to what kind of videos we're going to do. So I thank y'all very much once again, and with that, also, before I move on, speaking of videos and stuff, I mentioned this last stream, but I'd like to mention it again. We are working on our first video. It's going to be a video that is pretty cool. I'm not going to spoil it. I did spoil it a little bit last night, and if you're around for that, good for you. If you weren't, you're going to have to wait till we release it. But we have put a pretty decent amount of the support from the channel into the budget for this video, trying to get drones and things to be able to get some very good footage of what we're talking about. And so I hope that the end product is something that y'all can all enjoy. It's going to be something that is kind of moving out of the Ukraine sphere, but it's also going to be involving it a little bit. So I hope y'all do enjoy it, and I hope y'all look forward to it, because it will be coming out soon. So with that, I hope I've answered everyone's questions very well in that segment. And if you do have questions, we are going to get to them before the end of the night. But with that, we're now going to move on to the southern area of the Donbass, which includes the small area in this village and Mariupol, which has had tons of news, more news than we've ever gotten out of it in a single day. Starting out here in this village of Vodnyanya, we've seen that the Russian separatists have hit the village with artillery today. What's also interesting before this bombardment starts is that there's a wind farm out here. And here in America, wind farms are incredibly rare, actually, but over in Europe, it appears that they're an incredibly common sight, which is just interesting to me. Anyways, here's a video of them striking a town full of civilians. As you can see, the fire is a little bit off. It appears that half of it fell outside of the village, but now we can see the rest of the salvo coming in and is starting to hit the outside perimeter of the village. A pretty decent amount. So hopefully not a lot of civilians were injured or killed in that attack, because it appeared to be directly on the village, and we don't know if there were any Ukrainian troops in that town to warrant such an artillery bombardment. I'm sure there wasn't. We know that the Russians really don't care about civilian casualties, and they just attack things to do it. So with that, we're now going to move on into the city of Mariupol, where we've had a load of news today, and I've actually been able to develop my front line a little bit more accurately than what we've been seeing over the past 30 days or so. Today, we did get enough news down here in this area to confirm that the Russians have taken the port of Mariupol, but not the city of Mariupol. So here's the video of that. You can actually hear the gunfire in the port, which pretty much confirms that the Russians have pushed into it far enough to assume that they have captured it. As you can hear the report of gunfire just out in the distance. And you can also see a bit of damage throughout the port, which is suggesting that a firefight or at least an artillery bombardment had occurred there recently. So with that, I did a little bit of geolocating today to make sure that this wasn't the so-called port of Mariupol, and this was the port of Mariupol. And I actually found out this is like really just a bunch of earthworks over here, and there really is no dock in this area, which was odd to me. But nonetheless, this is the only port in Mariupol, and so now it appears that the Russians control it. However, while they may control it, they're not going to use it, because the city of Mariupol is still contested. And so the Ukrainians may manage to actually retake the port in a few days through the course of a miracle, and then you have a whole bunch of Russian transport ships that are literally moored at the port or would have to be leaving under incredible speed. So we're now going to move on to the news inside of the city, where we've seen today a little Rambo in the making. This was a very interesting video right here, because this guy managed to crawl up onto the roof of a house and then pull out an AT weapon and shoot it at a BMP-2 from the rooftop. I thought this was a very interesting video, so I hope y'all agree with me that this was something. So you see the guy climbing onto the roof. The BMP is right there, right in the not too far away actually. And he hit the tank. That is something. I mean, like, that is amazing. This guy went through a lot of effort to get a good shot on that BMP. He literally climbed up onto the roof of this house just to get a good shot on it. Now, that is something I considered impressive. So, pretty neat. We got Rambo there. Hopefully he'll live through the war and get an award for that. So we're now going to move on into some news that I marked as being in the center of the city, or we can see some fighting in Mariupol. I marked it as the center of the city because I didn't know exactly where this was, so it could really be anywhere in the city, but it's definitely not in the dead center of it as far as I know. So anyways, here's the video. As you can see, a T-72B, it seems, is moving up through the city. Maybe that's actually a T-72B3 now that I take a good look at it. So now the tank fires into a building. Of course, there's no fire coming from it. There's no firefight involved around it. The tank just rolls up to a building and destroys it. Once again, it's kind of like that weird, sketchy video that the Russians are always making, where it's questionable whether anything's actually happening there or not. It's like, is there really anything going on? And the answer is most likely no. And the Ukrainian videos, you can actually hear bullets bouncing around them off the ground. You know, they make that little sound. But in the Russian videos, you never hear that. You never hear enemy fire in any way. So anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. So you see the tank fires again into another building. Now it looks like the smoke is starting to surround it a good bit. Now fires into the building once again. going to skip forward through this because honestly, it's such a faked vid. As far as no fire coming from anything, no AT fire. It's not even retreating for cover or anything. It's pretty much fake. So we're going to skip through it a pretty good deal. We see once again the tank is still in the same spot, firing into the same building. Now it's firing a machine gun into it, firing the main gun again, firing the main gun again. Now it's backing up a little bit, but we can see that it didn't back up too much. Now you see Russian infantry over here, not hiding for cover from whatever it's shooting at. They're standing right in the line of fire of that building. You gotta love it. You know, just the dumbest stuff. Now we hear radio chatter a little bit, skip through it again. Russian tank still up there. Russian infantry still standing in the open. Skip forward a little bit more. Here, a little bit of rifle fire from the Russians, but once again, nothing back from the Ukrainians. The tank now has decided to stop showing its side to the enemy infantry that are supposedly there, because that would probably get it destroyed. Now it's going to face forwards again, because that looks cool on camera as well. We can now hear a BTR-82 firing behind them at another building, where there's no enemy fire coming from. Very interesting to me, once again, just gotta say. I mean, like, you can't make this stuff up. This stuff is just cheap, you know? I mean, like, if anything, this isn't even like war news per se. This is just trashing on the Russians, because when you watch Ukrainian videos, that stuff is authentic. You can tell by the sounds, the noise, what's going on. You know that stuff's legit. When you watch a Russian video, there's a million questions that go through my mind, at least, as to why is there no enemy fire? And y'all have heard that from me a million times, and I know y'all get the picture at this point, but still, it's something I gotta rehash, because the Russians do a terrible job at propaganda. So at the end of the video, you see the BTR-82 rolling up, firing over the tank at something it hasn't fired at before, and the tank is firing at something else entirely, it seems. It's terrible video, terrible propaganda. I mean, like, I would like to say that that's real, but it just can't be. There's no firefight or noise or anything coming from anywhere. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we're going to see some Chechens in Mariupol. Check out this vid, and look at this guy's modded AK here, and kind of like the thumbnail. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like that attachment that they put on to put the scope on. It's kind of a little tacky, and I know that's not really what you care about in the war. You care about efficiency, but still, I mean, like, I would at least want to have some class to the gun, but that just looks ugly. That's like stainless steel on blued steel. That's Anyways, here's the video. Look at them. They're really taking that fire, man. That one guy's firing his AK-12. The rest of them are just standing there looking around, and they're taking no fire whatsoever. Can't hear bullets bouncing off the ground. Nothing. I mean, the Russians have got to be some of the best, of the cream of the crop, because the enemy is so scared of them, they're not even around when they're in the firefight. The Russians are shooting at them at, like, their dust, because they've run away so quickly, and the dust is just sitting there still looking like a person standing up. I don't know, but they've got to just be some hot stuff, you know, to be firing at nothing all the time. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Did I see that? Okay. I think that is the first. Get out the notebooks, y'all. That is the first time I've ever seen the smoke of a round hitting a wall and chipping into it in a video from the Russians. First time ever. I don't know if that's enemy fire. Maybe they're staging it, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say, since that's aimed at them, that may be the first instance of them taking Ukrainian enemy fire. Well, to them it's enemy fire, but to us, that would be the good guy shooting. But that may be the first instance of that I've ever seen on film. So take out the notebooks, y'all, and write it down that on this day, on April 8th at 11:26 p.m. Eastern Time, we saw the first evidence that the Ukrainians may actually be around when they're filming these videos, just not anywhere close or not a lot of them or something. So anyways, that's the end of that video. So we're going to move on to the next one. Once again, I want everyone to know I'm not really sure if that is Ukrainian fire, because then again, we saw in another video that there was a Chechen off camera and they included him for just a split second, and he was actually shooting up the side of the wall that this Chechen was crouched near to make it look like they were taking fire, or he was just terrible at shooting. Y'all may remember the whole rant I went on over that one. So I'm not really sure if that is friendly or enemy fire as far as they're concerned, but that was the first time I've actually seen smoke come off of a wall from gunfire, and we haven't actually seen someone doing it on film. So I'm saying it may be Ukrainian, but I'm not exactly sure. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten, which is that this old man here in this picture has a terrible story. This old man was a veteran of the military. He was an incredible guy. I'll actually get to the post so that way y'all can see him. This guy was a retired officer. It appears in the Russian Navy, or maybe the Ukrainian Navy. Well, actually the Soviet Navy. It would have been the Soviet Navy at the time, considering he's so old. He was a retired naval officer, a journalist, a writer, and it appears, according to the Post, that he also was a volunteer in Mariupol, and he died at the hands of the Russians after they beat him to death. And to confirm, yes, he was in the Soviet Navy. There is the flag of the Soviet Navy right back there. Now that is heinous. The Russians don't even care that this man served in the Soviet Navy, which was pretty much when Ukraine and Russia, at least on paper, were friends. That's sickening. They don't even care for the people who served for their country at one point. And I tell you, that's just something that when you think about it, this is terrible. You know, the poor guy, you know, I mean, like, he had probably, when he was alive in the Soviet Union, he probably believed in the cause, because if he's an officer, that tells you that he went a little bit of the extra step up to serve in the Soviet army. And while I'm not a big fan of the Soviets, because I'm American, and, you know, they're the antithesis of the United States, at least as far as political rivalry, you got to respect the guy for his service. And yet, at the end of the day, the Russians will still beat the man to death. That tells you a lot. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news inside the city, where we can see an RPG being used by the Chechens in Mariupol. So I'm going to let y'all see this video. Oh, wait a minute. Did y'all hear that? Wait a minute. That's the first time I ever heard that. You could actually hear the little bullet kind of like whistling after it hit something and it started flying off. Listen to that again. That right there. That, if y'all can hear that, that lets me know that they actually are somewhere on the front lines. These two videos tonight are the first times that you can actually say they're taking fire in a video from somewhere where it's not just blatantly obvious that they're doing it. So this is something. I don't really know what this is suggesting, but it may be suggesting that there's a bit of a change and that they may be winning so much that they're actually fine with filming stuff actually coming out from the front lines. Then again, that's all kind of like assumptions. I'm not entirely sure about that, because as far as I know, the defenders of Mariupol can be holding incredibly well, and they will hold for weeks beyond this point. But apparently the Russians must be feeling something different, or otherwise this video wouldn't have the sound of bullets actually cracking and hitting around them. So very interesting. Let me know in the comments what y'all think about this video, but we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see an airstrike being conducted by the Russians in Mariupol. This, of course, was filmed, I'm assuming, by a Ukrainian. It appears that they say in the comments of the Reddit it's not an airstrike, but we'll see. We'll be the judge of that. I'd say that's artillery, honestly. I have to agree with the guy in the comments of this post. Say that was probably artillery. You don't hear a jet. If that was a bomb, you would of course hear an aircraft dropping it, because it'd have to be close, at least somewhere. So I believe that was probably artillery that hit somewhere in the Azovstal. So we're now going to move on from that video to the next video from inside the Azovstal, where you see that the Ukrainians have unfortunately lost a tank today in this video. I'm not really sure if this is one of the tanks we've seen in prior videos where the Azov was absolutely slaughtering the Russians, but unfortunately it did lose a tank, and in a siege, such equipment is irreplaceable because there will be no way to get any more equipment in there like that. I'm not sure how many tanks they had to start with, so hopefully this isn't a severe loss of equipment for the defenders, and it's just a minor setback to the defensive positions in the Azovstal plant. But anyways, as you can see, the tank suffered a direct hit to its side. I'm not really sure if the crew was inside of it or if they survived if they were inside. Hopefully they did. But nonetheless, it looks like that tank may have been knocked out for the entirety of the siege, which is very unfortunate. But I hope the defenders still hold on with the strength and the determination that they've been holding on with for the past 32 days or so, which is huge when you think about how long that's been for a siege to go on in the modern day, with no supplies whatsoever from the outside as far as we know. So we're now going to move on to the last bit of location, well, Mariupol news, before we move on to the international news, where we see the Azov destroying the Russians in Mariupol. This is kind of a good way to end the Mariupol news, because we've seen a little bit of Ukrainian losses here and there on video today, but we can still see that the Azov is kicking them here and there, and so here's the video. As you can see, there's some kind of armored vehicle. It looks like it might be a BMP, and they hit it dead on, knocking the tank out, but the tank is still rolling forward. So very good. It's good to see that they're still putting up a fight, and they're not just getting smacked around in Mariupol. But then again, the siege has been going on for an incredibly long time. I will, of course, weigh in with my assumptions and opinion based off of the knowledge. They've been holding for about 32 days at this point. Maybe around 30 to be, well, really 40, honestly, to be exact. So, it's been an incredibly long time. And for most of the siege, the city has been without food, water, resupplies, or heating. Now that spring is coming in, the heating, it doesn't really matter so much because hopefully the temperature in the local area will increase and they won't have to worry about freezing. But nonetheless, they have had no supplies come into the city, or if they've had any, it's been an incredibly small amount, but I don't know of any supplies that have made it in. So with that in mind, them holding this long is a miracle in a way. I don't know how they've been doing it, but they've been managing it. And so you gotta give them a pat on the back and a round of applause for that, because that's unbelievable. But as far as the city holding, this is the only area of the Ukrainian front where I can feel that there may be bad news coming for Ukraine, because the Russians are starting to put out a lot of videos, especially today. This is more than we've ever seen during the entirety of the war, which suggests that there may have been some kind of progress today for them to have uploaded all this information to the Russian public and then to the internet as a whole. So we're going to keep an eye on the situation in Mariupol. Hopefully they can hold, and it sounds like they may be trying to conduct a counterattack through the Russian lines to try and break the siege of Mariupol and relieve the defenders, but I'm not really sure about that. We don't really have a lot of information to support that. So with that, we're now going to move on from the Mariupol area to the 2 bits of international news we've gotten today, which are pretty cool. Slovakia has stepped up and offered a huge amount of aid in terms of how much budget they spend on their military, and they have offered S-300 systems to Ukraine, and they've actually delivered them today. Here you can see the S-300 systems en route on board train cars to Ukraine. Just loads of equipment here. And I mean, like, for Slovakia, which is an incredibly small country and probably has an incredibly small military budget, this is like giving the world, in a way. Let's pull up, let's see if we actually have a number. Slovakian military equipment. Ground Forces of the Slovak Republic. Very interesting name. But we're going to move down the list to see if we can find this in particular. Oh, what's that? A Sig Sauer SSG 3000. Wow, I like that. Sorry, getting a little sidetracked there. I like that rifle. Might look into seeing if you can buy those here in America. We're going to move on down. Let's see what we got. S300s. S300s. We're looking for the S300s. 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 Oh, come on. Did I pass them? S-300 systems. S-300 systems. Let's see, armored vehicles, reconnaissance, artillery, engineering vehicles, utility vehicles, and military trucks. So maybe I passed them? There's no way I passed them, right? Huh. Let's see, how many S-300s does Slovakia have? Okay, so apparently it provided all of its S-300s and MiG-29s to Ukraine, but how many MiG-29s do they have? Slovak Air Force. Let's see their inventory of MiG-29s to see if that was a large number they've lended. MiG-29s, they have 11. Wow, good lord. Actually, that's a pretty decent number. I believe that's about half of what the Polish have, but let's pull that up. Polish Air Force, MiG-29. Wait, hold it. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll just put in the Polish Air Force, scroll down to the list. I don't know, Wikipedia doesn't provide the best numbers, but they're the quickest ones to pull up. 23 to 26 MiG-29s in service. So, yeah, the Slovaks may be providing about half of what the Polish may have been able to provide if that deal had gone through, which means that the Slovaks have pulled through for Ukraine, and they're providing a decent amount of aid in air defense systems and also aircraft, hopefully, in the future, although we haven't heard a lot of news about that. And so finally, the last bit of news that we've got for the night before we go to the questions is that the S-300s crossed the border in this video. It appeared to be later on well, actually, it appears that they're exiting a garage. For some reason, I thought they were entering the country when I saw this video the first time. I think I was just tired because I hadn't drank coffee, but here's the video of them moving out of the garage. So you can see them moving out. And you see it with night vision. That's pretty cool. Now you see them operating a forklift. Now this man, you know, he's like the pride of the military because he's forklift certified. Anyways, we're gonna let the video go on. Loading up some kind of shipping container. It looks like it's some kind of command post because it's got a door and such on it. Very interesting. It just looks like a normal shipping container, which is pretty cool. I like that. And now we can see them being loaded onto the trains. Actually being moved out of the station as well. So then they headed to Ukraine to be handed over for the Ukrainians to use for the duration of the war, or maybe even keep them afterwards, because it sounded like the Slovaks in the news article we read said that they would hand over their S-300s if they could get viable replacements for them from other Western countries, which suggests that some kind of deal was arranged, and then they were able to replace them. So the Ukrainians may keep those permanently, for all we know. So with that, we've reached the end of the news for tonight. I hope you all have all enjoyed. If you've been around for nothing but the news and you're about to leave, make sure to subscribe if you're a new viewer. We do enjoy subscribers, and we also have a Discord if you'd like to join that below. I occasionally try and get on there, but due to how busy my schedule is, it's really hard, but I do try and answer everyone's comments on Discord, at least at some point. So I thank you all once again, and now we're going to move on to the questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so we're currently sitting at just about, I believe, 15 to 20 super chats. So do you remember the guy a little while back? It was his birthday, and he put in a super chat on his birthday.
Yeah, I do. I remember him.
So he's back again, and his name is Enables. He puts in a donation of $100 tonight and says, "Thanks for the previous birthday wishes a week ago. Mariupol, its deceased's residents, the continued loss of life, and the continued resistance. My heart aches and bleeds for the pointless affair of this all. Many conflicting religious are also claiming this a holy war."
Interesting. I thank you very much for the support once again. I can't believe I got to thank you again for the support, man, because you helped us out on your birthday, which I thought was incredibly nice of you, considering it was your birthday. And now you're back supporting us again with, of course, huge donations that help out this channel, a large deal in like a lump sum. And so I thank you so much. It does mean a lot to me that you're helping us out in such a great deal. And I do have to agree that my heart bleeds for Mariupol. One thing, though, that I do have to be honest about is that as the war goes on and you watch this stuff more and more, you start to get a little bit numb to it because it's not new anymore and it's not fresh. And I remember that when I'm looking at these videos and I'm looking at them and you're watching the Russians strike another town, and I think, when this stuff was new, it was incredibly shocking, and it still is, and it's still uncalled for. I mean, like, just because it's something that's been going on for a month and a half doesn't negate the suffering and casualties that are being caused. And I totally agree with you. That's why I still say, and I say it more so now than I did then, that the Russians should be held accountable, and the officers in charge of conducting these attacks should be captured and held for their crimes and charged and punished for them. Hopefully, with something very dire. So I do agree with you, and I thank you very much once again for returning and giving us so much support. It means a lot to me, and it will help the channel to continue to go on. And so thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Robert McKenzie, who puts in a donation of $20. He says, what's it going to take before we or a NATO country gets involved as far as direct conflict with Russia?
As far as we know right now, the United States' official stance, which might as well be the rest of NATO's official stance, is that if any chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons are used inside of Ukraine, that will pretty much draw us directly into the conflict, because we said we will not stand for that kind of thing. So as far as I know, that's actually the only line that's been drawn that would lead us directly into war with Russia. Of course, there is the other thing, which I think has kind of fallen out of the public eye because the Russians have moved so far away from the NATO border. Let me actually just measure that out real quick. The closest front line to the NATO border right now in Ukraine is about 530 miles away in the north, and to the south is around 470. So really the same distance in both directions. So it's not like the Russian war is getting close to NATO borders and people are getting concerned as much as they used to be. So I don't really think a missile landing in a NATO country is going to be a concern anymore, and I think it's really just those three concerns that the United States laid out a while ago that would get us involved in this war. So I hope that answers your question, and I thank you so much for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night goes to BSG Wolf, who is a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a $20 donation and says, I had heard Mariupol had received a small amount of supplies recently. Any info or truth to that?
Could you say that first part again? Because I don't really think I was following it all too well.
He said that he had heard Mariupol had received a small amount of supplies. Do you have any info or is there any truth to that?
I did see that, but I didn't get any proof on it. It was just a Twitter post from like a random person, and they said, Mariupol got aid. And I was like, that wasn't released by any official Ukrainian organization as far as I could find when I tried to go looking for that. And so I discredited that, because if that was something that had been managed, the Ukrainian defense, the Ukrainian defense Twitter would have immediately gotten out. So we supplied the defenders of Mariupol. We did it. And that would have been a huge deal, because breaking through this much Russian territory and getting down to Mariupol to supply them is a massive feat. And yet no official Ukrainian source actually confirmed that. As far as I could find, and so I didn't actually include it on the news because I couldn't actually get any proof to say it was true or not. So as far as I know, the defenders of Mariupol have actually been running on the same amount of supplies they had during the opening days of the war when they became a besieged city. So I hope that does answer your question in a way, and I thank you very much for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And also, by the way, I've noticed many people in the chat saying that the Russian bots are getting quite heavy. If you see a Russian bot, just tag my name, Enforcer Matt, and tag the bot, and I'll try to get them removed as quick as I can. Tonight, we only have about 2 moderators on, including myself, so we're a little short-staffed, but I'll try to get to them if I can. So the next one up is from Daniel, our mentor, who puts in a donation of $20 and says, what up, Enforcer? I would go to battle with you any day. Let the people know where you are from.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you would go to battle with me any day. I don't really know how well I would do in a battle, of course, because that's kind of all hypotheticals. You could be the guy who thinks it's poetic to be kind of like a coward in a way and say, "Oh, I'd be so scared," or you could be the guy who thinks it's really cool to be a macho guy and be like, "I'm gonna kill everyone there." I really don't know how I react, honestly, but I'm glad to know that you think it would be nice to go into battle with me. So I thank you very much for that comment. That's a very interesting one and very nice one too. But I thank you very much for the support once again, and I'm glad that you feel that way. That's pretty interesting. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Zero J Kwan, who puts in a donation of $20. He says, Enforcer, any speculation of what is preventing Ukraine troops from going into Mariupol and reinforcing the city, since the northern front is now over? Or is the southern front just too strong? Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you very much for the support. And as far as I know, this front line right here that I have drawn out is the current front line. It appears to be confirmed by a video evidence as far as we've been able to get, and it does actually back up my assumption as to how far the Russian lines would advance before they probably stopped. But to answer that question, the Ukrainians would have to cover from Volnovakha alone about 30 miles of territory to reach the city of Mariupol from there. And from the other major highway over here, they'd have to do 22 plus about another. Come on, load. Okay, we'll do that again. Plus another 30 miles from that direction. So 50 miles of traveling down this road, or 30 miles from Volnovakha to reach Mariupol. Now, the fastest an army usually advances in a modern war is about 9 to 10 miles a day. So that means it would take them 3 days of advancing at lightning fast speed to be able to reach Mariupol, which is something that, when you think about it, it would be very hard for them to accomplish. So while they may be planning on something like that, the actual reasonableness of that happening incredibly quickly and actually happening in time, from maybe what the Ukrainian defenders know, may be pointless, because by the time they actually reach the city, which may take them about a week, the city could have fallen, and then it was kind of a pointless offensive going nowhere, really, in a way. So I think they've kind of consigned the defenders of Mariupol as write-offs, in a way that they're just holding the city to buy time for the rest of Ukraine at this point. And really, honestly, they've even served that purpose. But considering that they probably know that the Russians will execute the Azov because they are the supposed fascists they are going for, and that would be the hugest victory thing. And while it may be a violation of the rules of war, they don't really care. We've seen them not care about that at all. They probably just start executing the captured Azov, so they have no reason to surrender, and they have all the incentive to just keep on fighting the Russians. So I think Mariupol is kind of a write-off, but then again, take that with a grain of salt. I'm not in the Ukrainian Defense Force, so I don't exactly know what their strategy as far as Mariupol is. They may be looking at some kind of breakthrough to reach Mariupol and relieve it, which I hope that they can do, but that would be a huge... I mean, like, even for the Ukrainians, which I have high hopes for because they've done incredibly well so far, that is a daunting task to reach 30 miles in a couple of days, 30 miles of front. That would be pretty tough. But, of course, I'm not going to say they can't do it, but I'm going to say it's probably highly unlikely. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer your question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from The Norm, who puts in a donation of $12.34 exactly. They say cheers and hope to see the video soon.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope you do enjoy the video. It's going to be very interesting. At least as far as Matthew and me have been putting together, and so I think y'all will like it a good bit. So I thank you very much once again for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Ferdy R, who puts in a $12 donation and says, I think it is appropriate to help Ukraine because of a treaty of a peacekeeper from years ago from USA and Russia was not upheld.
I do agree. That was the treaty of the nuclear... Wait, let me think. The Treaty of Non-Nuclear Proliferation. I believe that was the actual name of it. It was agreed upon in 1994 by Ukraine, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States all together. And all three of the foreign signers that weren't Ukraine pledged to uphold Ukraine's sovereignty even after they gave up their nuclear weapons. So I do agree completely that it is something that we need to uphold, because we did sign that treaty in good faith and meant to follow up on it. That's what you sign treaties for. And so if you sign a treaty saying that, you need to follow it up. So I highly agree that we should continue to give Ukraine support, and I believe we should give them everything they ask for, because really honestly, they're kind of in the same position that Poland was in 1920 when the Soviets were trying to push out of the borders that they had and kind of start spreading communism to the rest of Europe. Also, let me pull that up real quick so that way I can get the name of it. The Sino-Polish War. Here we go. Hopefully that pulls up. The Polish-Soviet War is what they call it. From 1918 to well, actually late autumn of 1918. Interesting. And then there was a break. Everyone took a break until Valentine's Day of 1919, and then the war went on to the 18th of March in 1921. Sorry, I almost said 2021. And so we can see that the Soviets actually took more casualties, as usual, compared to the Polish defenders. And also, what's really interesting is that we can actually see that the Ukrainians were involved in this war, the Ukrainian People's Republic, and they were involved on the sides of the Poles, which is really interesting. Let's take a look at the map and see how in the world were they involved. Looks like they're not going to show us an exact map. Very unfortunate, but nonetheless, as you can see there, kind of Poland was in the same position that Ukraine is in now historically, and that they're pretty much holding off the Russians from the rest of the Western world and just stopping them from kind of rolling their way through the rest of it. And so I believe we should give them a load of support, because they're kind of in the same historical role that Poland was in the 20s. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. So I thank you very much for the support. It does mean a lot, and it does help us to continue to run this channel. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from M. Adams, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, can you reflect on the status of Moldova and if their nation comes under attack from Russia? That's actually a duplicated question, so we're going to move on from that one. Next up is a question from Diffuse56, who is a longtime channel supporter, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, did you happen to see the video supposedly showing Ukrainian troops shooting an unarmed prisoner? Is it Russian propaganda? Slava Ukraine.
I never saw that video. A lot of people told me about it. A lot of people told me they were shooting Russians in the legs. I never saw it. And on top of that, a lot of people started to throw up a lot of questions afterwards as to its authenticity. So I've never seen it. I'm not going to discredit that it didn't happen. I'm not going to say that it did happen either. I don't really know what the validity of that was. The thing is, though, is that, I mean, it's kind of a situation that I can see happening. And here's why. Let me explain. I'm not saying that the Ukrainians are as bad as the Russians. This is what I'm saying. Killing prisoners is kind of a thing that does happen in a war. And it doesn't happen because you're just trying to take out your anger on the enemy. Sometimes you capture prisoners and then you're like, well, we can't even feed ourselves. We can't feed them. We can't even take care of them. What do we do? You know, and it's like, well, we don't really have anything to do. We can't set them free. They're just going to go join the other army. And if we can't take care of them, they're kind of in a spot where it'd just be easier for them to not exist. And so it's been common to just kill prisoners sometimes when you can't take care of them. But the thing is, though, is that we know that the Ukrainians, for the largest part, during the entirety of this war, have been able to take care of Russian prisoners. We know because of how the front lines have formed. We know that they have well-connected logistical lines. So I don't really believe, honestly, and that's kind of being biased in a way because I really have no reason for this assumption. I don't believe that that was real. I think the Russians may have done that as a propaganda stunt. But then again, I'd have to see the video to actually try and give my own opinion on it. So that's kind of all my assumptions based off of what I've heard. But then again, I don't have any video to actually look at to base that off of. So take that kind of with a grain of salt. But with that, I hope I did answer the question. And I thank you so much for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a comment from Rich Hogan, who puts in a donation of $10. He says, the rifle looked a lot like an HK G28.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for weighing that in. Thankful for you weighing that in. I've seen someone say, I believe they said it looked like an SR-72, and someone else who said it looked like something else. So a lot of people have been saying that, but I think at the end of the day, it looked a lot like an AR platform. So I'm just going to put it under the umbrella category of it was probably some kind of AR platform. And with that, also another thing, I want to address this real quick because I actually saw someone in the comments that I want to address real quick. Timeout BBTH Huz says that's BS enforcement. I think he's talking about me saying that it's common to execute prisoners when you can't really take care of them. I'm going to give 2 examples from American history. One, the paratroopers that landed behind the lines near Caen on D-Day actually started to execute German prisoners because there was no way for them to take care of them. There was nowhere for them to send them, and so they decided that they were just going to have to start executing them. So they would execute like groups of 3 of them here and there because there's just no way to take care of them. And at the end of the day, what are you going to do? Like tie them up with rope and like guide them around like dogs on a leash or something? You know, you can't. Like there's no way to do that in the middle of a firefight. So at some point, it kind of is acceptable, at least as far as the rules of war are concerned, because I believe there is a condition saying that if you can't take care of prisoners in the front line, it's kind of acceptable to execute them. And in World War I, even it was the case, and it was documented sometimes, that the U.S. Army, like, you know, soldiers on the lower level, so it wasn't like a representative of the entire army, but if an offensive was ongoing and the Americans were making loads of ground, and there was really no logistical chain behind them for a mile or so for them to really take care of anything. If Germans surrendered, they would just walk them back a few hundred yards away from the front where the Germans couldn't see it happening right in front of their own eyes. And they would just shoot the prisoners and then return to the front because there's really no way for them to take care of them, and there was no way for them to get them anywhere to go to a prisoner of war camp. So I'm sorry that you feel like that's not the case, but there is historical evidence to show that that is in fact the case, that prisoners do get executed if there's no way to take care of them. You can also see that in prisoner of war camps in Germany in World War II because it was well documented that the Germans actually took okay care of Western troops, not Eastern ones, Western ones. And when the war started to get really bad, of course, they prioritized their frontline troops over the soldiers, even in prisoner of war camps. And so they would start going through food shortages while the frontline soldiers were in a little bit of a better condition. So there is evidence to show that if you can't take care of prisoners, at least historically, you can execute them or start to deprive them of basic things like food and such. So I hope that answers that question. I had to address that because I saw that and I was like, you know, I'm not gonna let that one slide because there's too much historical evidence to show that that isn't the case. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Daniel Turner and a $10 donation from Junebug72. They are both longtime channel supporters, and we very much appreciate their support. So next up, we have a comment from Kurt Sievert, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, need anti-ship missiles to Odessa ASAP to knock out some fascist Federation ships. Glory to the Cossack nation.
I do agree 100%. Hopefully, it sounds like the British may be the ones providing the anti-ship missiles. And I do hope that is the case because anti-ship missiles, although it doesn't look like a naval invasion will be happening at Odessa, will be very beneficial in ensuring that the Russian Navy can't operate so close to the coast in the Black Sea like they have been for the previous month and a half or so. So I thank you very much for the support, and I can entirely agree. And once again, glory to the Cossack nation, where the Cossacks originate from. It's a very interesting history that the Ukrainians have. I highly suggest y'all pull up YouTube videos and take a deep look into Ukrainian history because it has a very rich cultural one. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from Rich Hogan. He says, thanks again for all the hard work.
Thank you so much for the support. I'm glad to know that a lot of people do support the channel, and it makes me very happy that a lot of people do appreciate it. So I thank you once again. For the support. It means a lot to me, and it does help us to run the channel in the end. So it's not just really emotional and moral support, it's also important financial support to make sure that we can keep on going. So I thank you once again, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Tarian, who is becoming a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a donation of $7 and says, if Ukraine had been allowed to join NATO, do you think Putler would have still attacked? What's your opinion?
You know, that's a tough one to answer because it's a really interesting road to go down. Because if they had joined, you see, there's a blue line here, and this all represents NATO front lines. And real quick, I'm going to make the crudest line from here to the rest of Ukraine. And if Ukraine had joined NATO, this is what the shared front line in between Russia and NATO would have looked like. I'm going to actually make this a lot more cruder to save time. Sorry about that, y'all. I know that might drive a couple of y'all crazy. It kind of drives me crazy thinking about it, but, you know. Alright, so NATO. We'll color that in blue, like the other line, and thicken it a little bit. That's what the Russian front line with NATO would have looked like right here. And this is a monstrosity of a front line for them to cover. So strategically, this would have put Russia at such a disadvantage. I don't even really know what they would have done, because it almost forces them to try and fix something about this front line. But an open war with the West would mean complete destruction for Russia. It's a lose-lose situation for them. Their army would be defeated, and then they would resort to nukes, which is mutually assured destruction. So if Ukraine was able to join NATO, I think they would have just been up the creek without a paddle in a way, because there would have really been nothing they could have done without, in the end, destroying their country somehow by either being defeated in a conventional war or being destroyed in a nuclear onslaught. So I think, I mean, I don't know. I think they maybe would have just let it go, because there's really no way they could have won at that point, really. So that's kind of my assessment on it. But then again, they may have attacked anyways, because then they would have been in a situation where they were at rock bottom and there was nowhere else to go but up or into oblivion, and so they may have attacked anyways. I'm not really sure. It could have gone either way. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from DC90, who is a longtime channel supporter. He says, always enjoy the streams. Keep up the good work, y'all, and have a beer on me.
And thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy the channel, and we will have a beer on you. So thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Paul, the cat lover Canavan, who says, greetings from Ireland. I just want to show a little appreciation and support. Keep it up. And he puts in a donation of 10 pounds, I think is what that is.
Is it like the L with the little line through it?
It's like I'm not really sure how to describe that, but no, it's not that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the support. Anyways, it does mean a lot to us, and I am glad that you do enjoy our content. It means a lot to me that people do like it. Of course, you know, I wouldn't like to be on YouTube making content that people hate. So thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Gus M, who says, are you concerned if France elect a new president on Sunday? Leaf Springs Army ready to roll.
I'm not too concerned. I think the French stance will remain the same. I don't know a lot about French politics to know if there's like a radical president running who's like, we love Russia, we want to be friends with Russia, because historically that would be kind of the case. France has usually, at least historically, had a large communist party that kind of made them a little bit closer to the Soviets in a way than anyone else could be. You know, at least in Western Europe. And so there was a decent amount, you know, like I think a decent amount of the internationals, you know, the Communist International Conventions actually happened in France. So historically there would be a precedent to say that that may be concerning, but I think in the modern context, as far as I know, there's no presidential candidate running in France that would start to buddy up with the Russians in a way. So I thank you very much for the support. That's kind of my answer to the question. But then again, I could be a little bit ignorant on French politics, so take it with a grain of salt. But I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Jonathan White, who says, as a fellow history major, does the war prove that Western battle tactics are superior, even with Russian equipment?
Yes, it does. You can see with the Ukrainians, because they went through a major army remodeling and restructuring after the 2014 Donbass conflict died down. And we can see that they've implemented mostly Western strategies with Russian equipment that was modernized with Western standards, and we can see that they're doing rather well. And they've also gotten a lot of imports of Western equipment. And so we can see when you pair that up, even with them being undergunned and under-equipped in a way compared to their Russian counterparts on paper, their tactics show that they can still hold out and, in fact, win against the Russians. So I do believe that it is a superior strategy. And if you were to compare Western tactics versus Russian tactics and then throw the technology difference into the picture, you would see that Western tactics would reign superior to whatever the Russians could throw at it, at least conventionally. I'm not every time I talk about like Russia versus the West, just know I'm ruling nukes out of the equation, because the nukes would equalize everything. Everyone would be destroyed equally in most ways. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer your question, at least as far as I'm concerned, you know, about my opinion on it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Richard Simpkins, who says, I don't know, but suspect you and I are on opposite sides politically, but I don't care. This war shows all Americans are, or at least should be, on the same side when it comes to what's important. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you for the support. Of course, I don't really get into my political opinions because I don't really think the news has a good deal of throwing a twist on things. I am, of course, pro-Ukrainian, but I try to keep my assessments neutral, and that's why you may notice that sometimes I say the Ukrainians may be at a disadvantage here, but an advantage in other places because. News is news, and just because I support Ukraine doesn't mean I see everything through rose-tinted vision and the Ukrainians will win everywhere at everything. Of course, there will be losses in in battles, but you can win wars nonetheless. So I thank you very much for the support. And really, I don't really care about political sides. I don't really get into political camps per se because I kind of find them to be too commercialized these days to the point that they don't even really resemble political parties anymore. They really resemble sports teams nearly in a way, and I don't like that kind of stuff. Politics shouldn't be like that, but that's kind of getting a little too far into it. Thank you for the support nonetheless, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Sam, who puts in a $10 donation and says, what are your thoughts on China backing the Russian stance that the massacre in Bucha was staged?
I think that's a load of crock. We know from satellite footage that the people who were butchered in Bucha had been there for weeks on that road. So I think that's nothing more than a flat-out lie. Those kind of lies shouldn't be allowed to be propagated by the West, and I believe that we should start coming down on the Chinese, at least with threats, so that way they'll hopefully retract that statement. And if they don't, maybe we need to back that up with some kind of economic sanctions of some kind, because I'm sure that money speaks huge volumes to the Chinese, considering that their economy relies so much on an export market. So I thank you very much for the support. That's kind of my assessment of the matter, and it is, of course, pure disinformation. We have gotten proof that those bodies have been there for weeks, and so there's no way that could have been staged, because when the bodies showed up on satellite footage, the Russians were in definite and clear control of the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area. So I thank you very much for the support once again. Hope that does answer the question, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Robert McIver. Thank you very much, Robert, for your donation. And then next up, we have a comment from longtime channel supporter OG Wakanobi, who puts in a $5 donation and says, Wolverines.
Wolverines, and we got the BMP up there to show that too. Let me click on that again. Wolverines. There we go. Wolverines. Pretty neat. I thank you very much for the support once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Dozer242, who says, it's much easier to film a Stugna killing a tank opposed to other systems. Thank you for the hard work you guys do, and keep it up.
I do have to agree, and that's why I always follow up with every time I say that as far as footage goes, because Javelins may be doing a huge deal of work off camera that we can't see, but I can never entirely be sure about that because most of my assessments are based off of video evidence. And so if I don't have any video evidence to show something, that kind of tailors my outlook on the war and how it's going in a way. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And we have another $5 donation from Robert McIver. He says, Enforcer, you're the best war coverage on the internet. Thanks, Matt and Enforcer. Great job, guys.
Thank you very much for the support. I'm glad you do enjoy, and I hope that, not to do a plug, I like when I think of this, I'm like, I don't want to do a plug, but if you would like to support the channel and get something out of it, if you think it's really hot stuff, we do have merch, and I do love the shirts. I'm a big fan. I actually got a shirt for myself. It's like, oh, this will look pretty cool. So anyways, thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Ann Towner, who says, any news out of, can't even pronounce that. I'm just going to copy and paste that and put it into the chat so everybody will know what I'm talking about. I met someone from there once, and I am worried for them.
Kriviri. So Kriviri is right here on the map. It's right out. It's a pretty decent distance away from Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro. But what was the first part of that? Because I was trying to look in the chat to see the name. So what was the first part again?
They basically just said any news out of that place, and that they know somebody from there, and they're worried for them.
We haven't actually gotten any news out of there. It appears that the Russians are a pretty good distance away as far as front line that has to be covered. They cannot cross the Dnieper River. They don't possess the capabilities to launch some kind of freakish amphibious evasion from one side of the river to the other. They don't have that kind of ability. So the closest that the Russians actually have gotten to Kryvyi Rih down a major roadway from Kherson would be some, probably, if I had to guesstimate, that right western drive into Kryvyi Rih, about 100 miles, honestly. So they're actually pretty far away from the closest Russian front line that seems like a feasible push for the Russians. So I think they're okay, and we haven't really gotten a lot of news out there, so I hope that does ease your mind just a little bit. So I thank you very much for the support. Hope that does answer the question, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Christopher Ryan, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I highly recommend you check out the French election. Marine Le Pen is in second place and is a big friend of Putin and will leave the EU if elected. She's an extremist, but she has a chance of winning.
And what's her exact name again so I can pull that up?
Marine Le Pen. I'm sure I'm probably mispronouncing that. There's probably a fancy way to say it, but that's the southern way to say it.
The White House is freaked out that Putin's next big win could be in Paris. Let's look at the Wikipedia, although that may be a little untrue. Childhood, early political career, demonetization of the FN. Interesting. Now let's see here. First step is new leader, first presidential candidacy, electoral progress. We want to know her political opinions, political positions. Favors protectionism as an alternate to free trade. Well, that would be getting into my opinion. So, multiculturalism has failed. The Islamization of French society, European migrant crisis, and Arab Spring. That was a big deal across all of Europe. Caused a lot of controversy. Opposed to globalization. Loose Confederate Europe of the nations. She's called for France to leave the Eurozone. However, she no advocates France leaving the EU or the euro currency as of 2019. She's been a vocal opponent of the Treaty of Lisbon. For a short answer to that, amends the constitutional basis of the European Union, appears, opposes the EU membership for Turkey and Ukraine. Oh, well, that's not good. Le Pen has pledged to take France out of NATO. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of this one. That's not really a smart move to take France out of NATO. Not really. It's not really that France relies, well, NATO relies on France, really relies on the United States and the United Kingdom. So as long as you have those two main members, the integrity of NATO is upheld. But that is a really stupid move to pull France out of NATO, considering it was one of the original founding nations. She proposes to replace. And also another thing to me is that why in the world would you oppose being in the European Union? Although, of course, ideas change over time. When France and Germany were literally the two original members, they were like the two starting countries in the European Union. Very, very odd. But anyways, believes that Ukraine has been established a privileged partnership. I think this kind of stuff is not in vogue right now. I don't really know the opinions in France, but if she has these kinds of opinions and everyone's seeing in the West what's going on in Ukraine, I don't really think she'll win election. But if she did, her stances, at least as far, not going into the rest of the stuff, but her stances as far as Ukraine are very questionable and very pro-Russian. So hopefully she doesn't win, because if she does, that would be some bad news. So I thank you very much for the support. That's kind of my assessment on it, just doing a quick little read. So I hope that does answer your question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And just real quickly, I want to address a comment that just came in from the chat from Gabriel Hernandez for Photography, who says, there is absolutely no excuse to shoot prisoners in a modern day war front, period. Correct your statement, Geneva Convention. I just want to say, if it was unclear the first time, we're not condoning the shooting of prisoners at all, but nonetheless, it does happen regardless. You know, the law only means something if it's enforced. And in this case, you know, Russia is getting away with things, and there's people from, you know, every side that are doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. But I just wanted to correct that statement in case it was maybe, you know, phrased wrong or something. But
Well,
nonetheless,
I'm going to follow
go
up.
ahead.
I'm going to follow up on that real quick. Yeah, I've got to I mean, like, war is a terrible thing, and there's an ideal world that we want to live in, and that's why we create laws, because, you know, that's trying to enforce ideals and the way things should be. However, in practice, things will, of course, devolve. In war, regardless whether things are right or wrong, and I'm not saying I agree with executing prisoners or anything when I say something like that, so let that be clear moving on forward for people who apparently are not understanding that, don't really understand why, because I'm making it clear I don't condone it. I'm just saying that there's a historical context that prisoners are executed if there's no way to take care of them. That's kind of standard, really, in all of history. If you don't have any way to take care of them, how in the world are you even going to keep them? You know, like, you're going to have to either release them and then they go back to the other side, which is not an option in a war, or, you know, they starve to death under you. And, you know, then they're causing a liability because you're trying to provide the medical care, which you may not even have for your own troops, so on. And there's a historical precedent where prisoners are executed. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm saying that that's just what happens. I don't really know about the specific video that everyone's talking about because I've never seen it, but my basis of saying that is to say that it may be possible that there was no way for the Ukrainians to take care of them in that situation, and so that's really all they had left. I don't, like, on that, I try and be understanding of where people are coming from, but I don't really know where you are coming from with that, because I've made that as clear as possible, that there is a historic precedent that things like that may happen. I didn't make a statement at all saying that I support or condone that kind of thing, so maybe you should reassess your statement there, because honestly, I don't even know where it's really coming from. But nonetheless, interesting input, I suppose. But maybe you ought to... I mean, I don't want to come off as rude or anything, but maybe you ought to pay attention to what I'm saying more so than trying to lash out in a way. Maybe understand that I'm saying there's a historical precedent, not that I'm supporting the thing. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question of the night is from James Dunn, who says, every Russia drone that has been shot down has no made in Russia electronics, so we know now they can't make more with the bans.
Can you say that again? I don't really understand what that meant.
He says with the bans. So he's saying every Russia drone that's been shot down has no made in Russia electronics. So now we know they can't make more with the bans. I'm not sure if he means like the radio
Oh,
frequency
the bans, like the import bans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, you know, like the chips and stuff are made in Taiwan and all. And yes, I can't agree with that. That is true, and it also extends to their missiles. So I can't agree with that. And hopefully we'll see them start using them less and less because their stores and inventory of them will be running out, and maybe they'll start thinking about rationing their usage so that way they don't run out of them in the course of just this one war. So I thank you very much for the support. Can't agree with that, and I hope that input is insightful. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Orlos the Droid, who says, Enforcer, I've heard that Ukraine is a major supplier of ammo and artillery rounds for Russia. Do you have any input on that?
Can you say that one more time? I'm actually looking at the comments because I'm trying to see what the general input is on the whole entire, like, war crime thing. But anyways, could you say that one more time?
So he says, Enforcer, I've heard that Ukraine is a major supplier of ammo and artillery rounds for Russia. Do you have any input on that?
I'm not really sure if that's been the case recently, considering the whole entire Donbass issue. So I don't know if that's been the precedent for the past 8 years or so. But beforehand, at least in Soviet times, they were a major provider of most of the Soviet anti-tank equipment and anything that really involved any kind of electronics. So at least in Soviet times there were, so that may have extended into post-Soviet times as well, considering they had the existing industry to do such a thing. And we also know that the Kharkiv tractor factory was a major factory in Soviet times and post-Soviet times in producing Russian-designed vehicles, well, Soviet-designed vehicles, and afterwards, kind of like Ukrainian upgraded vehicles. So I hope that does answer the question in a way, at least historically, but I don't know about that situation in a modern spin. So I hope that kind of answers the question in a way. I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Acklerin, who says, has any of the Russian tech that has been shot down or found been sent to the West for them to investigate?
I don't think so. The drones that are usually getting shot down, we only see a little bit of the pictures of them, and then we don't really know what happens to them beyond that. It's kind of like they disappear into a black hole. So I don't really know if that is the exact thing that's happening to them. Maybe that is the case. but I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they just get destroyed, and the Ukrainians look at them, they're like, oh, they're destroyed, and they really have no way to really get them out of there, and so they just leave them there or destroy them completely. So I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Big Tex, who says, FYI, wind farms are not at all rare in Texas, the Midwest, or California. It's not just in the South. Texas gets a lot of electricity from their wind turbines.
Very interesting. I didn't know that wind turbines are more of a thing towards the western side of the United States. I don't really know about the northeastern coast of the U.S., but here in the South, seeing a windmill is unheard of, especially in Alabama. Here in Alabama, something like 30% of the electrical grid is actually run by nuclear power. We have something like 5 nuclear reactors in the state, and then the rest of it, surprisingly, comes from hydroelectric dams. So oddly enough, you wouldn't think that Alabama would be one of the leading states on green energy, but hydroelectricity and nuclear power are some of the, I guess you could call them alternative green options, and they make up actually a sizable amount of the power production on our grid. So, very interesting. I did not know that about Texas, so thank you for sharing that info with us, and also thank you for the support. And with that, how many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
So at the current moment, we have about 7 left.
All right. And so with that, on to the next question.
So the next question goes to Kevin C., who says, why is Ukraine not buying U.S. armored vehicles from the Taliban at a steep discount? They are selling.
Well, I like the joke there, and also it's kind of true in a way, but I don't think I don't really think that'd be possible. I don't really know how they'd ship them out of Afghanistan into Ukraine, taking that comment a little bit seriously and trying to answer it in a way. But it's still interesting input nonetheless. I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just a note for later, Enforcer, we have a user here, Jay Masters, here that wants to say his OCD is killing him. He wants you to update your Chrome browser up there in the top right whenever you have the chance after the stream, so that way he can calm down with his OCD. So he's been saying that the whole stream, so we're definitely going to have to do that after we get off the stream. But anyways, moving on to the next question we have is from Enables once again. He says something about NATO modernization. Excuse me, hold on a minute. It's a little bit of a jumble there. Something about NATO modernization of old Soviet equipment. That is why there is a reluctance.
Could you kind of explain how the reluctance part falls into the rest of the question real quick?
So let's see. It was a little bit of a typo in there, so I'm trying to decipher it a little bit. So he said, let's see. NATO modernization of old Soviet equipment. Why is that why there's a reluctance? I'm not really sure.
To kind of answer the question how I think it may be coming out, I'm not really sure where the reluctance comes in though. Yes, Eastern, like Soviet, post-Soviet equipment has been modernized in most former Soviet countries to a Western standard. Like the Slovaks and the Czechs, they use modified T-72s that have been updated with Western equipment, as well as the Ukrainians. They've tried to update their tanks as well towards that arena. I don't really know where the reluctance would come in, though, but I can say that that is something that commonly happens in former Soviet countries and also Warsaw Pact countries. So I hope that answers the question in a way, or at least agrees with it. I'm sorry, we really can't understand, but if you would like to shoot Matthew or me a DM on Discord afterwards and explain it, maybe I can get around to it sometime and try and answer it there. But I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to have to move on to the next question.
So next up, we have a comment from Diffuse56 again. He says, Enforcer, I have the URL for the shooting the prisoner propaganda. Shall I post it to the chat, or would you prefer otherwise?
If you could send it to me over my Discord, I'll take a look at it there, or over the Discord server, if you remember of that. I'll try and take a look at it in either one after the stream. So I thank you for the offer, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Mr. Bit 10, who says, thanks for the war coverage. The Krashuka 4 electronic warfare system was captured by Ukrainian forces in Makariv and handed over to the USA for study.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Thank you very much for sharing that info. Let me pull up real quick the Krashuka. Let's see. Let me put that in. Krashuka 4. Let me see that. Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system. I did see. I just remembered. I did see the news of that, and I think I showed it on stream. I just said it was an electronic warfare vehicle. Broadband multifunction jamming station is on a 4-axle chassis. Leaf springs? I think so. Moving on from that. Counters AWACS and other airborne radar systems as the effectively disrupt low Earth orbit satellites and can cause permanent damage to targeted radio electronic devices. Very interesting. I did not know that such a jamming vehicle existed, so I'm sure that the United States will learn a decent amount of info from it. They'll actually probably learn in usual fashion that the thing is kind of dated and it may be overhyped, because that's what happened with, I believe, the MiG-31, I believe. They actually managed, someone defected, a Soviet pilot defected from the Soviet Union and landed in Japan with one of those, and then they started taking it apart before they were going to send it back to Russia, well, the Soviet Union. Sorry, I'm kind of getting them mixed up here. And they found out that the thing was incredibly dated. So I wonder if they'll find that out about this, or if they'll find out it was actually a pretty capable system. So nonetheless, thank you very much for sharing that with us and letting us know that tech has made it to the United States for study that has been captured by the Ukrainians in this war. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from BSG Wolf, a longtime channel supporter. He says, what if Russia shoots down a U.S. or NATO surveillance flight? Would that trigger direct combat with Russia?
Yes, that would. That would be firing on the U.S. military, or, of course, if you wanted, get into technical stuff, Departments of Defense, property, and equipment. And then, that would pretty much invoke Article 5. That's an attack on the military, which is an attack on, the nation. And so that would invoke Article 5. The entirety of NATO would go to war within hours or days. So I thank you very much for the support. That is kind of like the rundown on what would happen. They are military aircraft and equipment, and so if they were attacked, it's like attacking a group of infantry or a tank or civilians that are, living inside of a NATO country or in the United States. So I thank you very much for the support. Hope that does answer the question, and we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Jonathan White, who says, with Russia making threats to Japan, would any attack draw on NATO and Europe, as it would bring out U.S. 7th Fleet?
I don't think so. I think you're saying the question is, if Russia and Japan went to war in the Russo-Japanese War Part 2, would Europe get involved? Am I correct in that assumption, Matthew? Is that kind of how you read it?
What was that again?
That if Russia and Japan went to war, somehow Europe would get involved. Is that kind of how you read that as well?
Yeah, and if that would bring out the 7th Fleet from the United States.
I believe at that point, there would be no expense spared in what we would be mobilizing. I think we would start moving everything, both into the Pacific and also into the Mediterranean and the North Atlantic in a way. So I'm not exactly sure. Once again, I do have to say this. I'm not exactly familiar with every single military unit, every single fleet, and things like that. I just look at the overall situation. That's kind of what I specialized at the beginning of these streams in, and so I think it would, but I'm going to have to generally quote ignorance because I don't really know where the 7th Fleet is based. It could be a North Atlantic fleet, could be a Pacific fleet. I'm not exactly sure. So then again, that's just kind of my input as far as I know. So take it with a grain of salt in a way. But I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And let me quickly issue a correction real quick. One of the users here who sent in a comment is actually Orlos the Druid and not the Droid. My bad, and I will make sure to pronounce it correctly from now on. But the next question we have here is from Honest M, who says, do you think if Ukraine still had their nuclear weapons, Russia would still have attempted this war?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, attempting a direct war on another nuclear power would be invoking a death sentence for both of them. So, no, they wouldn't have done that at all. That was also another thing that the United States was kind of scared about. Although the Ukrainians really couldn't fund the maintenance of those nukes at the time, was that if they kept them, now you're going to have multiple nuclear powers in Eastern Europe that are just a ticking time bomb. Kind of like how India and Pakistan, while they're both kind of like buddying up with Russia a little bit, they're right now in the process, as far as I can tell, of actually attacking each other here and there across most of the border. and they're both nuclear powers. And that's kind of the closest that the world gets to nuclear annihilation on a daily basis, is what's happening in between Pakistan and India almost every day. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, let's see here. Our second to last super chat of the night goes to BSG Wolf, who says, I am worried for a friend and her daughter in Zaporizhia. Any news there?
I don't think we've gotten a lot of news from Zaporizhia in any way. So it's close to the front lines. There was a little bit of news that used to come out where the Russians were like right on the outskirts, but it appears that they were maybe pushed back, or those were breakthrough convoys that made it to Zaporizhia. So I haven't gotten any news from that area, so I hope that does answer the question. I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does ease your mind in a way, because I believe right now that they are safe and they're not directly on the front line. So thank you once again for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from Robert McIver again. Thank you very much, Robert, for your continued support of the channel. And for our final super chat of the night goes to Kevin Scott 76, who says, the news said there are Ukrainians in the U.S. training. I wonder for what weapons.
Oh man, I wish I could say. I mean, like, there's so many weapons that the United States has that the Ukrainians could be training on. They could be training on tanks, rifles. Highly unlikely though, because rifles are really easy to learn. You just send them over with a manual, and that should kind of fix that problem. New anti-tank weapons. But really, honestly, they've kind of been exposed to most of the small arms of the United States, at least in bits and pieces, because we've seen M4s over there, we've seen javelins, we've seen AT4s, so we know with most of the things that can be carried by infantry, they have had at least some training with it. So I believe that would kind of lead me to assume that they're either training on, I mean, there's so much they could. It could be mortars, it could be tanks, Bradleys, which are infantry fighting vehicles. It could really be anything. So one can only imagine what they're probably training them on. We'll just have to see if this war lasts for long, what they were trained on, and if they actually get that equipment sent over to Ukraine to be used. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does kind of answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to answer 3 questions from the live chat, since that was our last super chat, and we are going to end the stream afterwards. And so what do we got, Matthew?
So first up, we have a question from Hippo, who says, Enforcer, do you think the docks in Mariupol are in any usable condition for the Russians to operate out of?
It looks like in the video the docks were in usable condition. As you can see here, I'll click on it again and we'll take a look at it. The cranes still look intact. I'm not sure if they've maybe destroyed the motor works in them, but they do look intact for the large part. And as far as the video can be told, the dock still looks intact. So it may be usable, but I don't think they'll be using it soon, because it's still so close to a front line. Even though the defenders may not have the ability to strike at ships, I don't think they'd be trying to sell them in anytime soon. So I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Bernard Ackel, who says, Enforcer, do you think NATO is now providing large-scale air defense system, with news that Slovakia is providing the S-300 and the U.S. providing the Patriot system to replace it in Slovakia?
I do think so. I think we may be trying to push in to Ukraine supplies and equipment that NATO aligned countries still have that the Ukrainians may be trained on, and that's why we were trying to push the Polish to hand over their MiG-29s to Ukraine, and it now looks like we're also doing that for other countries, and it looks like a lot of the former Warsaw Pact countries are taking advantage of this moment to actually upgrade their own arsenal and get rid of the old stuff, and also look pretty good in the cameras as they're giving aid to Ukraine. So I do agree. I believe that the West is probably, well, the United States in particular, is starting to hand out air defense systems like candy to anyone who's willing to hand over their stuff to Ukraine, which I actually think is a really smart move. So I hope that answers the question in a way, and we're going to move on to the final question of the night. And so who's the lucky person who got the final question?
So the lucky viewer of the night who the final question goes to is James Reyes. He says, Enforcer, if Zelensky were to be assassinated, who would take his place? Also, what response would the West have? Would that cause boots to be placed on the ground?
I'm not sure if it would, because, you know, then again, we didn't say anything about the president getting assassinated, leading us in there. It was just biological, nuclear, or chemical. So as long as he's not nuked, gassed, or you know, anything like that happened to him, I think we would be okay. But let's see what the line of succession is for the president of Ukraine, because I'm sure that if we pull it up, we can actually just find out really quick. President of Ukraine. We'll go to Wikipedia because I don't want to get on a Ukrainian website. Maybe there's like Russian hacking going on there, and I might have all my stuff spilled. Member. We'll just pull up the line of succession. Line of succession. Ukraine. Let's see if they have a line of succession. Oh boy, look at all these articles from a month ago talking about, President Zelensky refused to evacuate. What happens if he dies? And it's like a month later now, and he's still alive. That's funny. Do they not? I'm going to read Business Insider real quick. We're going to see. Let's see, an attack. Both sides flurry of international sanctions. / I stay in the capital. One hell of a guy for doing that. Former comedian. Let's see. Come on, can we just get to the line of succession? I don't like how some news companies pad stuff. Like, just get to the point. Look at this. Look, this is something I find funny. But despite a series of early-stage Russian failures following the country's chaotic initial attack, okay, and remember, this was a whole month ago, several military analysts told The Guardian this week that the Kremlin is slowly solving its logistical issues and could be ready to stage a successful assault on Kyiv in the coming days. Look who's laughing now. We're now going to try and get to the actual bottom of this. Let's see. Under the country's constitution, the speaker or chairperson of the parliament is next in line to succeed the president. So this person called Verkhovna Rada. Let's pull that up. Verkhovna Rada. I spelled that wrong. Sorry about that. Verkhovna Rada. What? Wait a minute, hang on. That didn't answer the question. That rolls. Ruslan. Okay, there's the name. Ruslan Stefanchuk. Let's get to that. Chairman. He is the chairman. All right. This is the man who would succeed Zelensky if Zelensky was to be killed. His name is Ruslan Stefanchuk. So if Zelensky was killed, that's who would replace him. That's the line of succession. And he's a member of the Servant of the People Party, which is the same party that Zelensky is in. It's based off of the name of the TV show that Zelensky was in before he became president. So that's interesting and a very funny story nonetheless. So I hope that answers both part of the questions. Ruslan would be the one to succeed Zelensky if he was assassinated, and I don't think it would really lead to the United States getting involved. It would be incredibly unfortunate, and the world would be outraged at it, but I don't think it would actually lead the United States to get involved, unless if there was a large public outcry that was almost unanimous saying we should. So I hope that answers the question, and with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. So I hope you all have all enjoyed. Once again, we will be running the stream tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will have our fundraiser on Sunday night. So I hope you all have all enjoyed tonight's stream. Once again, any support y'all give to the channel is a huge deal, and I thank all of the supporters for tonight and everyone else who asked a lot of interesting questions. They were very interesting to cover, and I hope y'all got something out of it, because I certainly did enjoy answering all of the questions and reporting the news once more. We, of course, do have the merchandise shop, and so if you would like to show your support to the channel and like get a shirt or a mug, they do look really cool. So hop over to the shop and get one of those if you would like. And with that, I'll see y'all all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, and have a great night.